The knights stand up and look intently ahead, where their inspiration stands. They shout joyfully, eager to see the emperor, the very one who made the enemies surrender. It was his strength that defeated the traitor merchants. The knights shout his name, glorifying his valor. They joyfully shout that it was their emperor who won the victory over the infidels. They consider themselves the main defenders of their faith and sincerely believe that they protect the Messiah himself. The knights enthusiastically raise their hands up and joyfully announce that they have already crossed seas, mountains, and deserts, as well as conquered 3 entire continents. At the very edge of the mountain appears a rider in all his glory. The knights loudly proclaim that they are the renowned heroes of Lemurin. His name is Heracles, the great emperor of 3 continents and the chosen one of the divine light. This is Heracles the First. He proudly raises his sword above his head, listening to the loud approving shouts of his warriors. Long ago there lived an emperor who managed to revive the Lemurian Empire. Under his rule, it grew from a weakened country into a vast state spanning 3 continents. The story of Heracles begins in his childhood. In the lands of Lemuria, little Heracles runs with all his might and shouts loudly that he will not allow this. He rides a horse loudly declaring that he never wanted to become emperor. Hercules is the 3rd prince of the Lemuria Empire, which is already on the verge of decline. After the death of his father, Emperor Adrien III, the throne was left orphaned. Although he was not initially meant to become ruler, his older brothers proved insufficiently educated and completely unsuitable for the role. So now it was up to him to make the choice and accept the burden of imperial power. For Burke, the very idea of becoming emperor of even a small, weak country is a real trial. It is worse for him than any punishment, and Hercules is angry because now, due to his brother's foolishness, he is forced to govern an entire state. He loudly says that he wants a peaceful life without unnecessary fuss the most. At that moment, the girl behind notices that Hercules is behaving too selfishly. Hercules immediately recognized this voice and understood that he had already been found. It was Karolina, his childhood friend who always watched over him and did not allow him to do foolish things. Hercules got angry. He did not even suspect that she could go so far just to catch him. Karolina ran after him and shouted why he was running away from her. The boy stopped, looked surprised, and asked if she was still running after him. Karolina smiled and said that only this way could she catch up with him. She shouts after him, demanding that he stop running and accept the imperial power. He irritably stops and turns to her, asking if she is joking. He does not want to become the ruler of a weak and exhausted country that may soon disappear. Suddenly, Karolina reaches out, grabs Hercules by the collar, and sharply pulls him down. Hercules does not have time to recover before he is flying off the horse straight to the ground. He has not yet come to his senses or fully opened his eyes, and Karolina has already sat on him astride so that he cannot even get up. She says to him with a proud smile that she managed to catch him, and Heracles clenches his teeth angrily and looks at her with resentment. Once the Lemurian Empire covered 3 continents and was the strongest state in the world. Its power was felt in wars, trade, and culture, and the legacy of the Lemurians is still remembered in human history. The elves founded a powerful empire that left a deep mark in history. All power, including priests and women, belonged to them. Once this state was considered the most powerful in the world, but a civil war divided it into eastern and western parts. The west was completely destroyed, and the eastern Lemurian Empire is gradually weakening due to constant attacks by various tribes. Hercules thought if the state has already lost 60% of its lands and continues to weaken, then things are really bad. After all, it is difficult to trade in a country where there are not enough fertile fields and no access to the sea. Maybe that is why everything is going downhill, he thought. At that moment, an elderly man approaches the boys in the field and asks how they are doing. The youth immediately recognize him as the 19th emperor of the Lemurian Empire, Adrien III. They respectfully bow and reply that everything is going great and thank Illy for her help. He says that if everything goes well, there will be no famine in the country this year. He takes responsibility for this choice and sincerely apologizes to ordinary people for all the hardships they had to endure. They approach Heracles, a little boy nearby, and ask how he is doing. After all, they live on vast lands, and it is they who are destined to determine the future of this country. Heracles sits silently and reads a book attentively. When he is told to follow everyone, he ignores these words and does not move from his place. He approaches the boy and offers to walk together around these parts, promising that he will still have time to finish reading the book. Heracles raises his head, looks around. Around him is only an endless wheat field. He shrugs and decides to return to the book that has so captivated him. She takes the book from him and notes that the author of this story looked at the world without embellishment, saw everything as it is. In the book, in her opinion, there even remains an imprint of true reality. However, she adds, if you just read, it is impossible to feel the same emotions that real life gives. Heracles turns away, offended by these words. Hercules looked around and saw two people working nearby. He turned to his father and asked what they were doing. He explains that wheat is harvested from the ears, then threshed, grain is obtained, and bread is baked, which everyone eats. He points out that it is becoming difficult for them to hold the weapons. Their hands are already tired, and the weapons seem uncomfortable and heavy to use. Heracles nods at others and addresses his father. What if we try to take something like a comb instead of sticks? It stopped confused, not understanding what relation these events had to it. After all, everyone around also began to understand the situation and joined the cause. The workers cheerfully shout that the work has become easy and their hands no longer get tired. A little girl happily adds, now she can grind several ears of corn at once. Heracles explains that instead of pulling the fruit with one hand, it is easier to use both hands. This way the fruit is easier to detach under its own weight. If the platform is made a little lower, even the smallest children will be able to use it, he hints at a little girl. Hercules proudly says that thanks to this they will be able to save a lot of energy and work much more efficiently. The father smiles and agrees that this is great news. A strange prolonged sound, sqsqsqsqsqsqs, spread throughout the room, filling it with a mysterious murmur. It seemed that this noise had neither beginning nor end. It repeated incessantly wave after wave. Even the very air seemed to freeze, listening to this incomprehensible melody. No one tried to decipher what this sound meant, as it simply existed, becoming part of this story and its strange accompaniment, against which everything seemed to stop. He averts his eyes and awkwardly admits that he learned about it only from some foreign book. The father smiles and says that he has a truly clever son. Heracles pondered, as in their library and archives, he had never seen anything like it, but Heracles himself had a secret. He is knowledgeable in the most modern sciences and technologies, although he prefers to hide this knowledge from others. Many consider him a child genius, and the father always tried to fulfill all his whims. However, this knowledge deprived him of freedom, and people began to exaggerate his abilities. Returning to the present, Karolina insists that he finally take the emperor's throne. Hercules looked at Karolina, who was holding his hand tightly. Shyly, slightly blushing, he asked her to get off him first, saying that it was probably hard for her to lie like that. Caroline says that if she gets off, he will run away again. She begins to say that there is something hard under her, but suddenly Hercules panics and screams loudly. Karolina again persistently asks him to become emperor. She is convinced that he has enough knowledge and talent to take the throne, but he refuses once again and confidently says that he will never agree to become emperor. Hercules, tired and out of breath, admits that he dreams of traveling around the world when he grows up. For now, he is gathering knowledge and does not want to serve this country at all. He firmly orders her to come down immediately and confidently says that the emperor will never take away his freedom. She wonders if this really means that he does not want to be near her. Heracles briefly reflects on her words and looks at the girl with gentle surprise. Karolina sincerely said that she loves her homeland and wants to protect it, because once her father, Emperor Adrien, ruled here. She had long dreamed of seeing with her own eyes the new Lemurian empire built by Hercules. She could not hold back tears and confessed that what she wants most is to see Hercules become emperor. He suddenly jumps up, overwhelmed by panic, and quickly asks why she is crying. She tries to answer, but tears stop her. Hercules pulls himself together, clenches his fists, and holds back tears. He quietly tells her that he will take Karolina with him on a journey. She calms down a little and asks if this is a joke. He gently strokes her head and promises that it is true and he will do everything she asks. The girl asked if she could look at the book about martial arts that her mother forbade her even to touch. The boy easily agreed and said she could read it. Then she asked if he would come with her to drink tea. The boy immediately assured her he would come. Finally, the girl asked one more thing, if he would ever become emperor, and he, without hesitation, answered that yes, he would become emperor. Silence fell in the room. Hercules looked at her attentively, and she calmly looked back, waiting for what he would say or do. Her face remained dry, there were no tears on it. Suddenly she grabbed him by the collar and pulled him along. He screamed and was dragged on the ground, not understanding what had happened. Karolina looked back and said that a true warrior must use any weapon to win. That was the advice of Hercules' father. He sadly utters her name, then, overwhelmed by horror, shouts to the whole forest that she betrayed him. So before the crowd of his subjects, he calmly rose to the throne and became emperor. Hercules sat on the throne, annoyedly taking the crown off his head. He grumbled unhappily that life in this country had become unbearable. He thinks aloud that the country constantly experiences a trade deficit, and their lands are shrinking because other races attack them. Because of this, the state weakens and loses its strength. He finds it hard to understand how his father could have died ruling such a state. He sadly realizes that his freedom was so short, and now an emperor's life awaits him. Suddenly, behind his back appears a dark hand, resembling a cloud cluster. Following it, in the air grows the silhouette of a woman with long hair, and it seems as if she is slowly hovering above the ground. She again reminds him that she already told him about his fate to become an emperor. She told him many interesting things about another world, and now sincerely hopes that he will succeed. Yes, it's true, he really possesses a great amount of knowledge about another world, but this knowledge was not originally his. He received it from the true owner, who was born and lived on planet Earth in the country of Japan. It seems that man's name was Sarari Ishishichi. In short, all the problems that happened before he overcame, thanks to the knowledge he gained in his past world. This strange demoness is to blame for all this. Bloody stains are noticeable on her outfit, long dark hair lies on her shoulders, and her face does not lose its terrifying, wide smile. He asks her if she remembers at least approximately how long she suffered from headaches because of this problem. In his past life, he was too simple and naive, even a little foolish. But anyway, knowledge always helps. The demoness warmly addresses him, expressing hope and trust. She says she sees a future great hero in him, and with these words disappears, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Heracles cannot withstand the pressure, and shouts that he wants to give up everything. Another man enters the room. Sighing, he says that Hercules does not look at all like someone who just became king. This is Christopher Augustus, Hercules' uncle. Heracles distrustfully asks if this man is really his relative. Despite the fact that he does not look like anyone from the family, Heracles pointed forward with his index finger and sternly added that this man was the one who suggested such an idea to his father. Hercules confesses to his uncle that, although he had two other brothers, he considered him the most important. But now Hercules calls his uncle the person who stands in his way, thoughtfully adding that he does not remember any special incidents in their relationship, but Adrien constantly talked a lot about him. Uncle said that Hercules began speaking at the age of 2, and at 3 he learned to read and write. At 4, he had gone through all the books in the castle, but even that soon became insufficient for him. Yet Hercules was already tired of these stories. He covered his ears with his hands and asked his uncle to stop talking. Moreover, my uncle found out that he created senbakoki, a device that significantly eased and sped up wheat harvesting. Since then, the wheat yield on their fields began to grow rapidly. Uncle says with a smile that both the people and the previous emperor are happy. He is confident that his rise to power was the right decision. Hercules sighs heavily and says with hope in his voice, "It's a pity they do not dare to challenge me." At that moment, a subordinate runs up to him, terrified, and addresses the emperor. Uncle, smiling, joked that a man who would turn everything upside down had just appeared here. To this, Hercules replied that it was impossible to invent a worse moment for such changes. That man was Galphus Galanos, Karolina's father. He apologizes to Hercules and proposes that from now on they solve all matters concerning the management of the empire together. Hercules pretends to cover his ears from the noise and jokes. Now he definitely understands from whom Karolina inherited her character. Suddenly a young guy appears behind and asks not to blame Gelphus. He always behaves like that. This is Lucanos Lucalios, the leader of New Lemuria. Hercules turns to Lucanos and asks if he has been nearby all this time. Then Hercules admits that he feels very bad. Heracles says that right now in the room with him are his maternal relative, a soldier, and another member of their group, and he himself is an emperor who is only 12 years old. Heracles stands up and says that this country can no longer be saved. He takes off his crown and hands it to them, as if to say, "Now you deal with your political intrigues yourselves." And he himself will go to the library and just rest while everything around is falling apart. Lucano smiled awkwardly and admitted that they could not help, so they would have to rely on Lady Karolina again. Later, Hercules thoughtfully gazes out the window. He dreams, pondering that he came into this cruel world only to become the ruler of a country already doomed. He recalled the faces of his people who pleaded with him to save their country. Their voices, filled with hope and a plea for help, echoed in his memory. He closes the book, looks at them, and says that only they can give him true peace and help him feel spiritual rest. He says aloud that behind the walls of this castle, one can find much knowledge, but only these people nearby help him understand who he really is. He smiles and says that books are his best friends. They allow him to escape the narrow world and feel true freedom. The hero takes a new book in his hands, hoping that this time he will find himself in some interesting world. But suddenly Caroline appears from around the corner, calls him a panic, and Hercules gets so scared that he screams throughout the library. He hesitantly asks what happened, and she, with a smile on her face, replies that she sees he ended up here again. She loudly declares that she heard him, says he is avoiding work again. Hercules, offended, notes that Caroline was told everything again. Heracles notices that there are so many people around that it makes no sense for him to engage in politics. He reminds her he is not pressuring anyone, and then he admits it is enough for him just to have the title of emperor. Karolina looked down at him, and a slight contempt flashed in her eyes. She asked if he understood anything about politics. This made him angry, and he asked what she had just said. Karolina looked away and calmly whispered that it was really a big disappointment because even Adrien admitted it. She walks and sadly thinks about how upsetting it is. After all, she sincerely believed that Hercules could quickly solve all the country's financial problems. She admits that she seems to have been mistaken, since Hercules is only 12 years old. When the boy hears these words, his ear involuntarily twitches. She repeatedly reminds him what his father would say about this if he heard it. Hercules stands up and asks if she really thinks he is still a child. She turns to him and he just smiles and jokingly says that he understands politics. After that, he asks, "How much do you think I know about this world?" Hercules irritably says that as soon as he figures out what the point is here, dealing with it will be very easy. Karolina asks if he can solve it right now. Heracles became even angrier. Then he asserts if she continues to insist, he promises, within 3 years he will be able to put the empire's finances in order. Karolina smiles at him, but he sets his condition. If he can solve all the difficulties, then she must fulfill one of his requests. At first Karolina hesitated, but after thinking a little she still decided to agree. She promised to fulfill any of his requests. He smiles broadly, happy that Karolina gave her consent. This is the story of the difficult fate of the young Emperor Hercules. Using his knowledge, he managed to conquer 3 continents and gain power over the divine light. Nova Lemuria became completely different. Now everyone knows it as the city where almost all the world's wealth is gathered, a full 2/3. The empire became very wealthy because goods were constantly transported through its lands. Its prosperity was based on transit trade, which developed thanks to the country's convenient location. But this method of moving goods has 2 problems. The first arises due to political events and the economic condition of the country to which the cargo is headed, as well as due to the import and export conditions in that country. And also, in such a situation, all the wealth will inevitably end up in the hands of the neighboring state, the Kingdom of Fur, which is the main enemy of the largest empire. Hercules stands before a large bookcase and carefully examines the rows of books. He chooses one of them, opens it, and reads the pages with enthusiasm. When he finishes, he closes the book, looks thoughtfully ahead, and realizes something important for himself. He explains that this means the Empire of Lemuria needs to find a new way to earn money that will not be connected with transit trade. All the authorities joyfully exclaimed that Hercules has now truly found real motivation. Heracles snorts irritably, but says nothing in response. Everyone around looks at each other in surprise. No one could have imagined that something like this could happen to him. The uncle smiles and announces that he has finally made up his mind and has now become a true emperor. The believer confidently says that from this moment, they have a chance to save the Lemurian Empire from destruction. Heracles looks at them with a tired gaze and reminds them that in fact nothing has been done yet. The father gently praises his daughter, strokes her head, and says that she is doing everything right. The girl smiles and quietly agrees. At that moment, Heracles watches them with envy. He remembered how he once promised that in just 3 years, he would make the Lemurian Empire better. Now he realizes how foolish he was, but nothing can be fixed anymore. Drops of sweat roll down his face and his cheeks burn with shame. One girl approached him and asked if he did not find the dream of improving his finances in just 3 years absurd. Hercules lightly touched the book and confidently replied that it was absolutely realistic. He had started the same way, at first cautiously engaged in exporting goods. He explains that the main food in the empire is wheat, but besides it, they also grow grapes and olives here. Wine is made from grapes and oil from olives. These products, along with wine, are the ones the empire most often sells abroad. These are exactly the goods the empire exports abroad, and thanks to them, replenishes its main money reserves. He says that such goods are produced worldwide, and the craftsmen of the First Kingdom reach the same level of skill as in the Lemurian Empire. Due to fierce competition with other countries, they hardly benefit from this. He explains that this is necessary in order to finally restore financial stability in their lives. He pondered how to come up with something unique for Lemuria. everyone shares his ideas with interest, listening carefully to every word. As soon as the maid approaches them, everyone present pays attention to her. She carries a teapot and several cups. The maid carefully pours tea into each cup and attentively serves them to each guest. Everyone looks at the drink with curiosity and anxiety. It is black, and no one dares to take even a sip. Heracles slowly takes a sip from his mug and urges everyone not to hold back, since it has just been made. The heroes wanted to object to Aimer and express their thoughts, but Heracles smiles at them and encourages, "Do not hesitate, say everything you think." Everyone took their cup. One of the boys loudly remarked that the drink smells strange. Hearing this, everyone cautiously sniffed what was in their cups. They all take a sip together, trying to look calm. However, the man sitting next to Karolina grimaces at the unpleasant taste and mutters that the drink is terrible. Meanwhile, the priestess smiles cheerfully and admits that she unexpectedly even liked the drink, and it lifted her mood. Karolina looks at her interlocutor and asks, "Is this some kind of medicine?" She complains that it is too bitter for her. Hercules replies that he understands her feelings. He takes the cup from Karolina's hands and offers to try another way. He carefully pours milk into the drink and slowly stirs it with a spoon. When the camera pulls back, Karolina carefully examines her drinks and notices a drawing on the surface, a cat's face skillfully made from cream. She happily spends time with the cat, smiling beside it. Meanwhile, Hercules informs everyone that he mixed this into their mugs and suggests trying again. They decided to try once more together, and suddenly an unexpected joy appeared on their faces. The friends noted that this time the drink was much easier to drink, but the priestess admitted that she liked the previous version better. Karolina happily approaches everyone and shares her impressions. She really enjoys it. Hercules smiles, points to the cup, and says that it is coffee. No one can understand what kind of coffee this is. Karolina turns to her father and asks if he is familiar with it. The father frankly admits that he knows nothing about it and has never heard of anything like it. Hercules carefully removes the foam from Karolina's lips with his finger and quietly shares a memory. He recalls how he first heard about this drink on a train a few years ago. Back then, someone told him that this drink was grown near the church so that the servants would stay alert as long as possible. He explains that in this country there are very few sources of water, and even the water that is sometimes found is usually not suitable for drinking. Because of this, in Lemuria people usually drink grape wine or another beverage that can be stored for a long time. However, such a drink quickly intoxicates. That is why wealthy nobles prefer tea, which is imported from the Far East. However, even tea is quite expensive, as its delivery costs a lot. Coffee can be grown in various ways, and the main thing is that it is easy to adapt to the climate and soils of Lemuria. Therefore, it was quite natural to assume that if coffee is presented as a unique product of the empire, it will definitely interest people. Silence fell around. The priestess only quietly nods, showing that she understood everything. Hercules' uncle also expresses his opinion. He realized everything and agrees that this coffee really should be sold as something special. He returns to him with feigned joy, but a chill of indifference is heard in his voice. He says he is not impressed at all and irritably asks what all this is supposed to mean. He makes it clear that he understood nothing. He explains that for the sake of showcasing this drink, he specially bought a tea set in an eastern country known for its silk. White porcelain from there is a rare and expensive item, as such beauty is created only in those mysterious silk lands, and he is fully aware of this. Hercules raised the cup and calmly said that this exquisite porcelain piece was also made in the mysterious Lemuria. Everyone around looked at the cups with interest and stared at Hercules in amazement. The priest confidently says that it is simply impossible, as such pure white porcelain is made only in the silk country somewhere in the Far East. Even the mightiest kingdoms do not possess such workshops, let alone Maria, while Hercules calmly listens to her words and leisurely takes a sip of coffee. Hercules explained that this porcelain was made from animal bones, and it was made in London back in the 18th century. They did not know what London was, but Hercules did not pay attention to that. Heracles was always frank and expressed only his true thoughts. Until this moment, all the porcelain they created was black, so he wanted to try making it white. Now it is just an experiment, but the white appearance seems extraordinarily beautiful to him. Uncle Heracles could not contain his emotions, stood up, and loudly exclaimed that something simply incredible was happening. Uncle took a cup of coffee, looked thoughtfully ahead, and said that for a long time he perceived Lemuria as a backward region. But now he realized that there are truly sophisticated technologies here. Caroline's father agreed with surprise and added that he could not even imagine that they would be shown something so impressive and so unexpectedly. At that moment, Hercules remembered how much money he had given the master for making this porcelain. He was in a hurry, so he asked the master to do everything as quickly as possible because he really wanted to leave the palace sooner. He draws his subordinates' attention to the fact that despite all their efforts, the porcelain is still far from perfect, and there is almost no coffee left for sale. On the table in front of them, on a napkin, lies only a handful of coffee beans. Hercules says that first they need to raise funds and find masters who know how to make porcelain. He intends to sell these products primarily to aristocrats and wealthy merchants. The set will consist of 2 parts: bone china and coffee. Hercules smiles and declares that from now on coffee and porcelain will be the main goods of the empire. The people around rejoice and unanimously support his decision. Karolina says that thanks to this they have hope to somewhat improve their financial affairs. Her father enthusiastically suggests starting sales right now. Hercules listens carefully to their conversation and thinks to himself, until they can fully control the trade of these goods, porcelain and coffee will not have a significant impact on the overall situation. However, even if everything succeeds, the empire's finances will not recover earlier than in 5 years. He knows well that he needs to manage to do this in 3 years. He approached the window, looked at the sky, and sighed. Only the administrative documents remain to be dealt with. In the castle, he flips through numerous books, then sits at the board and begins to draw something using a ruler. He draws, thoughtfully tired, occasionally cheering himself up with a cup of coffee. 3 months have passed since he started dealing with the administration's papers, and he finally managed to find the answer to why all these difficulties arose. Books, scrolls, and various documents lie scattered everywhere around. He carefully examines the drawing with diagrams and concludes, everything happened as expected. The economy is slowing down due to increased military expenses, overall worsening of the situation, and lower tax efficiency. Soon he called everyone to the round table for a conversation. Heracles said everything was ready and suggested starting the meeting. He apologizes for the unexpected meeting, but explains that there can be no more delay. The time has come to act immediately against the empire. All the employees sit confused, not understanding what is happening. But can this be called an ordinary situation? After all, he is only 12 years old. Meanwhile, Hercules slowly drinks his coffee, and Karolina looks indignantly at anyone who dares to express dissatisfaction about him. Heracles solemnly said it was time to begin. Then he noticed an unfamiliar young man nearby and was surprised because he had not seen him here before. The boy was a little confused but still introduced himself. His name is Kroll, and today he will keep all the records. Hercules smiles and asks Kroll to explain how their tax system works. Kroll listens carefully to the question and slowly begins to explain. He explains that the empire has 6 main types of taxes: land tax, poll tax, trade tax, import tax, military tax, and tax for exemption from service. Then he summarizes, only they own the salt, so they have a monopoly on it. Hercules thanks him, adds that he is doing great, and wishes him to continue in the same spirit. The harsh one still stands in place, as if stunned that he was praised. At the same time, Heracles begins to summarize everything he has learned about the various tax systems. Hercules believes that the poll tax, trade tax, import duty, servant maintenance tax, and salt monopoly should be abolished or revised. At first everyone freezes, with various emotions on their faces. No one can immediately understand what they heard. Then a commotion begins. People confusedly call out to each other and ask how to collect taxes now if they are cancelled. Then Hercules asks everyone to calm down and promises to explain everything. At first he began to talk about the poll tax. Uncle Krasenchik explained that there is a special register in which all the inhabitants of the empire from whom this tax is collected are recorded. Hercules turns to Kroll and asks him to tell what he thinks about everything he has seen. Seeing such a scene, the crow commented that quite a few women had gathered here, but Heracles couldn't hold back and exclaimed, "This is not the end yet. There are also quite a few people with disabilities here." He explains that in this empire men pay a significantly higher poll tax than women, and for people with physical disabilities, the tax is even lower. Ordinary paper reports are used for accounting, so a family that actually has 4 men and 2 women can easily reduce the tax amount simply by reporting that they have 2 men and 4 women. One of the people stood up and said that in this country there live as many as 10 million people. Checking each one is simply unrealistic. Heracles heard this and agreed, acknowledging that such an idea really makes sense. He explains that horses cannot check whether people really have poor eyesight or hearing, so people started inventing these problems to avoid paying taxes. Thus, they managed to circumvent the laws. Hercules addresses the politicians and directly asks if they are confident in the truthfulness of this information. Confusion and fear immediately appear on their faces. Everyone begins to panic. Hercules calmly enjoys coffee and notes that he does not need a tax system that cannot efficiently collect taxes. Therefore, he believes such a system should simply be abolished. A tense silence fell around. Everyone looks at each other warily. Crow notices this and wonders. Just a moment ago, these talkative officials would not stop talking, and now it is as if they have lost the gift of speech. Hercules turned to Kroll and apologized for raising the issue again. He asked once more to explain how the collection of the trade tax is carried out. After that, he clarified. The tax amount for each merchant is determined separately, depending on his income and the type of goods he trades. Hercules asks Kroll where he finds out the exact amount of profit from sales. Kroll calmly says he will simply say this number out loud. Hercules exclaims indignantly that it is also easy to lie here. Kroll looks completely confused. Hercules explained that merchants have the ability to change their profit reports as they please, but at the same time, it is precisely through trade taxes that the state receives a lot of money into its treasury. Everything merchants earn, they must honestly give to the state in the form of tax. This is their duty. Heracles explained that it is precisely for this reason that he does not plan to change the rules for collecting trade taxes. However, considering the large expenditure of time, effort, and people, they cannot afford a sudden inspection. Therefore, such a proposal should be carefully reconsidered once again. Heracles continues his journey and carefully reviews the list of taxes. He notices that the import duty on goods only harms free trade, and the state gains almost no benefit from it. Then he comes across a tax for the emancipation of servants, although in his time such privileges for servants have long been abolished. This surprises the hero. Why keep old and senseless levies? Hercules confidently assures that both taxes will be abolished. Meanwhile, Crowley recalls how previously 4 tax systems were either completely abolished or sent back for revision almost immediately. Heracles scrolls through the list, and here they reach the item about the monopoly on salt. At that very moment, everyone around freezes in tension. Hercules explains that this policy was introduced during the time of the late Emperor Hadrian, and it was precisely thanks to it that the empire gained a new profitable resource. What the empire lost through the poll tax, it compensated by selling salt at a price 30 times higher than its usual cost. Heracles explained that salt has always been extremely important to people, and it was bought regardless of the price. However, it was here that he noticed something special. At that moment, a priest approaches them from behind, holding a bag on a tray. The rich immediately exchange worried glances. Horror is visible on their faces, as each already guesses what exactly is in that bag. Crow watches everything and cannot understand what is in front of him. Hercules calls Karolina over and suggests she try it. The girl tastes it and answers Hercules that it is simple salt. She adds that this salt is even better quality and cheaper than the one sold by the monopoly. Hercules says that this smuggled salt is much better than the one sold by the imperial monopoly. It is in almost every home, and its price is quite affordable. He says that the salt freely sold on the street is a sign that someone is secretly controlling everything behind his back. Politicians, meanwhile, hide their true intentions and look away. Hercules addresses all the men and sternly asks if they are laughing at his father's tax system. Everyone feels the tension in the air. They become uneasy, start sweating nervously, and shyly avert their eyes. At that moment, Karolina's father confidently draws his sword. At the same time, Heracles asks everyone present if they buy the salt sold only by the empire. Crowley is confused and does not understand why the officials are behaving so strangely. Only one thought comes to his mind. Could it be that they all really use smuggled salt? The room becomes quiet and tense. Heracles smiles broadly and sincerely apologizes to everyone. At that moment, everyone raises their eyes upward, looking at him confused and surprised. Hercules confidently states that this system was created only to somehow cover up the flaws of taxes, and it has long shown itself from the worst side. That is why they decided to cancel it. After these words, everyone freezes in surprise and fear, looking at him in astonishment. Hercules adds that he can also quietly ignore the story about the smuggled salt. Everyone immediately listens to Hercules warily, their interest growing. He clarifies that everything can only happen under a certain condition. The people around begin to speculate aloud what this condition might be. Hercules gives the merchant advice to unite with others and create a trade union. Everyone looks at him in surprise, and Kroll ponders what he has heard. Hercules explains that if merchants act in usual ways, it is not difficult for them to falsify their profits. Because of this, it is almost impossible to find out what they are really doing. If they organized a trade union, the number of people checking profits would significantly decrease. They could introduce mutual control, not only between trade unions and merchants, but also among the trade unions themselves. Then the authorities, together with the trade unions, would have the opportunity to partially regulate the economy and take the situation under their control. Some express concern. If a trade union is organized, it may cause price increases. If the union starts influencing the cost of a certain product, won't others also want to raise their prices to earn more profit? They say that many locals regard trade with disgust. They believe that money here is earned not simply by buying and selling, but through cunning and long deliberations. Heracles is outraged by this approach. He cannot understand at all how one can live earning money in such a way. Hercules explains, when there are few buyers, you should not raise prices, but unite with other merchants and together look for a way to sell the goods. After all, if prices suddenly rise, people will not buy at all, and all the goods will remain unwanted and spoil. He noted that everyone knows how the merchants united into their own, albeit unofficial, guild, so he suggested using this to their advantage. He addresses them as if they were important persons, snaps his fingers, and solemnly shares. He has invented a new tax system where everyone must make their contribution. My uncle is handing out flyers to everyone. Hercules explains that there are neither emperors nor high officials here. Ordinary people have gathered here who sincerely want to restore the Lemurian Empire and truly have the power to do so. Hercules urges everyone not to be shy and to openly ask about his decision. And although he is glad about this, people only silently read the papers and do not utter a single word. Seeing their reaction, Heracles admits what he really thinks. They receive too little. Therefore, he promises, if they manage to carry out financial reforms, he will personally ensure that they are paid a decent salary. Hercules smiles and suggests that everyone work together, unite their forces, and try to achieve the goal together. Everyone comes alive, actively sharing their questions and topics they have long wanted to raise. They want to understand everything and find what truly inspires them. A fierce dispute began in the meeting hall, which did not subside for 3 days and 3 nights in a row. And so, after numerous improvements and changes, a new tax system was created, which was solemnly announced to the entire empire. 2 years have passed since the new tax system was introduced in the country. During this period, the empire's revenues from collected taxes increased by almost 1.5 times compared to previous years. Tax expenditures, for example on salaries for employees of the imperial palace, were reviewed so that the state would spend less money. In addition, all the jewels belonging to the imperial house that had no historical significance were sold equally. So the treasury of the Lemurian Empire slowly began to fill up again. The new Emperor Hercules, who was only 14 years old, had already won the trust of the merchants responsible for internal trade and supplies. Karolina enthusiastically notes that this is wonderful. She sincerely believes that he will manage to overcome the empire's financial difficulties in less than 3 years. Hercules confidently says that he has known all this for a long time, and therefore asks why she still hasn't patted him on the head. She smiles, reaches out her hand, and gladly fulfills his request. Suddenly his face flushed, he turned away and became nervous. She looked at him and asked if he really wanted to go to the city. After all, in such a crowded place, everyone would definitely notice them, and it could cause a commotion. Hercules assured that everything was fine because for Karolina, he remained the same Hercules as before. For the rest of the world, he was not who everyone thought he was. Then Karolina turned to him and asked if some kind of magical trick was involved here. She says that she always plans ahead and books a place in advance. Then she asks if he wants to secretly leave the castle using magic and escape from his official duties. In response, he assures that Christopher and the team will take care of everything. He reaches out his hand to her and, smiling, says that today he will show Karolina the 4 most interesting places in Lemuria. She looks at him in surprise and blushes shyly. They finally arrive at the museum, and Heracles says that this is the very place he wanted to show her first. Karolina looks around in amazement and asks why there are so many different works of art here. She wants to know what kind of place this is. Hercules proudly explains that he made all of this with his own hands. Karolina cannot believe her ears and is very surprised by his answer. He asks her if she remembers the day when they opened the warehouse together during the financial audit. He recalled that at that time, he wanted to sell a few extra works of art to replenish the treasury. However, among these items, there were many genuine historical treasures that had great value. Some of them would be a pity to lose. He is sure that if he had dared to sell them, he would definitely have been cursed. He tells that there were so many of these items that they decided to display them here so that everyone could see them. She listens to him attentively while looking around. She stops near one of the exhibits and wonders if this item was really once stored in the national warehouse. Heracles explained that this land belongs to one of the local aristocrats and is in his private ownership. Initially, they planned to show only artistic valuables from the castle itself, but the aristocrats insisted that their personal treasures also be exhibited. Hercules smiled and suggested charging those who want to enter, everyone would need to buy an entrance ticket. Thus, he explained, they could earn a good amount. Heracles notices no reaction from Karolina. This irritates him. He looks at her attentively and thinks, as he did not expect such a response at all. Suddenly, a devilish woman appears before them and agrees with what was heard. She says that is true. Women are not interested in men's boasting. Heracles sharply demands that she stop appearing so suddenly. She only carelessly shrugs and says she is just sharing friendly advice. She claims that Karolina is capable of reasoning like any other person, but it seems that Karolina has not yet truly learned to appreciate art. She wonders if they should choose something more understandable. Heracles listens carefully and begins to consider other options. Hercules decided to move on. He announced that their next stop is the street market, where he used to go often. Everyone around is busy with their own business. Some sell bread, others clean things, someone sorts grain, separating it from chaff. Karolina approaches, looks at all this, and with surprise notes that it is very crowded and noisy here. She is among such lively movement for the first time. Heracles recalls how back then, when Lemuria was the heart of most of the world's wealth, its markets always had a huge selection of various goods. In fact, when they failed to find anything that could really interest people, they built a museum right next to the market. However, this became an advantage. Now museum visitors inevitably also visit the market, where they buy various goods. He explains to her that there are craftsmen here who can make a souvenir with her name and the required date, even if it is not a real coin. Karolina sincerely marvels and rejoices at this news. She comes closer and says that this place became so lively thanks to Heracles. He agrees with a smile. Heracles takes something small from the table, hands it to her, and asks, "How do you like this?" Karolina carefully examines the beads in his hand. Hercules says aloud that Karolina's eyes remind him of precious rubies, although in reality they are even more beautiful. Karolina blushes a little at these words and notes that the guy is clearly exaggerating. Hercules smiles and adds, if she likes something, she should not hesitate to say so. He will gladly buy it for her, but Karolina immediately refuses, explaining that it would be too much. She awkwardly admits that she really does not need it at all. From birth in the Galanos family, her life was focused on one important goal. Her father, an experienced warrior, taught his daughter only martial arts, all so that she could protect Hercules. She smiles and says she is sure none of these beads would suit her, even if he gave her at least one. Heracles asks if this means that she refuses the emperor's reward. An awkward pause ensues, and both remain silent. She says a little confusedly that this is not what she meant at all, and Hercules just laughs and asks why she wouldn't simply accept the gift if he really wants to please her. He says that Karolina is so beautiful that any clothes will suit her. From these words, she feels even more embarrassed and blushes. She turns away, asking him to stop joking with her. He only smiles in response, proud that he has achieved his goal. Karolina returns to the table where the jewelry is laid out, and her gaze lingers on a necklace with a large dark stone. Hercules notices how she reacts and wonders if anything pleases her. She abruptly turns away, assures that she likes nothing, and quickly walks away. Heracles pondered. He suspects that now is not the best moment to show the aqueduct during construction. After all, it is actually a bridge that carries water across a ravine or river. He thinks deeply and understands what the next step should be. Together they admire the horse races, impressed by the speed of the horses. Karolina shines with a happy, childlike, sincere smile. She watches with admiration as the chariots race by. In fact, she had long wanted to visit such a place. Heracles admits that he thought Karolina would like such a spectacle. She gladly agrees, believing that everyone enjoys such exciting races. She shares a story about chariot races, calling them a true test of trust between the rider and his horse. Here horses compete against each other, and people try to outpace one another in an exciting race for speed. Karolina confidently says that this passion leaves no one indifferent. She enthusiastically says that the red comet, Chanatus quadriga, looks incredibly cool. He is a famous jockey who has won many races on Herc since his very first race, and Hercules only briefly nods in response and says he understands. At the end, all the race participants waved goodbye to the spectators. Karolina sighed with relief and announced that the competition was over for today. Suddenly, the musicians loudly played on the trumpets. She turned around and saw how her father raised the handkerchief above his head, then solemnly lowered it down. Suddenly, riders on horses fly back into the arena, galloping at full speed. Karolina freezes and, completely shocked, does not take her eyes off them. She did not understand at all what was happening. Everyone suddenly decided to hold two races at once. From the beginning, the girl was sure there should be only one gate. Hercules shares that when they were renovating the stadium, there were more gates. Caroline listens to him attentively and with admiration. He explains that this stadium has long had financial problems and was often left without proper maintenance, so eventually they decided to carry out a major reconstruction there according to a new plan. Heracles, with a self-satisfied smile, notes that ultimately it is easier to build everything anew than to fix something. Suddenly, he is sharply interrupted. Someone loudly shouts that the enemy stands before him. It is Chanatas, who is nicknamed the Red Comet. Heracles stands silently, and she, amazed, exclaims in surprise. It is hard for her to believe that the real Heracles is before her, and he only quietly reflects, if only he understood his actions better. He watches Karolina shining with happiness and involuntarily smiles himself. At that moment it dawns on him, maybe this really will be the best. Having left the stadium, Karolina happily jumps and exclaims with excitement that it was something incredible. She still cannot believe that he dared to take a risk at the very last moment. Now in her eyes, Chervany truly deserved his nickname. Hercules sadly tells her that she has completely forgotten him. She suddenly stops while running, deeply bows to Hercules, and sincerely asks for forgiveness, confessing how sorry she is. Hercules approaches her and says that although it is already late, he asks if she wants to take a walk once more to the last place. She agrees, follows him, and asks where exactly they are heading. Hercules turns to her with a smile and says that they will go to the sea together. Hearing this, Karolina's face instantly becomes serious. Heracles cannot understand what is happening here, because this place does not resemble the usual alleys for walks or dates at all. He is even more surprised when the girl says she has never heard of such a thing before. She says that all the useless things from Lemuria end up in the sea. This place is considered the worst place one can get to. There is unbearable stench, dirt everywhere, and it is very unpleasant to be there. Hercules understands that in that world lovers often arrange meetings precisely in such places. He smiles and assures the girl that everything is fine, but she still categorically refuses. He gently pushes her forward, assuring her that everything is fine. She stubbornly tries to resist, but when they approach the sea, he tells her about it, and she cautiously opens her eyes. She stands and looks down at the endless sea, where the sun's rays shimmer on the waves. She is captivated by this scene and cannot look away. She looks around with interest and notices. Everywhere is clean, no trash is visible, and the water is clear and odorless. This harbor used to be filled with fish waste, but now order and cleanliness prevail. Heracles says it's all thanks to the new law. He says that previously all wastewater and garbage from Nova Lemuria were simply discharged directly into the sea, which made the harbor very polluted and sometimes even caused outbreaks of epidemics. He explains that this is exactly why he built this structure, to solve the problem that arose. Pointing to the building, he immediately adds, this is a wastewater treatment plant. He explains that in New Lemuria they created a system where all wastewater is first purified on special filters, and only after that does it enter the sea. He said that now there is a law that prohibits littering. He also announced that a new position is being created, a person who will monitor cleanliness and collect all the trash. To keep the area near the capital always tidy, it was decided to remove all the trash away from the city. Karolina exclaims in surprise that she cannot believe her eyes. He has done so much and even created a special law to remove all this garbage. Is it really that important? Hercules approaches her and calmly replies that it is truly necessary for him. He gently pulls her close and tenderly kisses her on the forehead. He smiles and says that if he is going on a date with a girl he likes, he wants the streets to be clean. At these words, her cheeks flare up and she feels a strong heat. He gently reaches out to her neck, carefully fastens the necklace on her, and says that this blue stone perfectly matches her red hair. The girl notices with surprise that this is exactly the necklace she saw here earlier. He smiles and replies that he noticed how much she liked this accessory when he was watching her. He tells Karolina that it suits her. She pauses briefly, then smiles sincerely and thanks him. They stand together for a while longer, almost motionless, as if Hercules is waiting for some significant event. After a brief pause, he frankly says that he would also like her to do the same. She looks at him fearfully, and he explains. All he asks is for her to thank him by kissing him on the cheek. He says that he worked long and hard for everything here to change for the better. It is precisely thanks to his efforts and right decisions that this place has become so wonderful. He reminded her that she had personally promised to fulfill any of his requests. Heracles carefully observed her reaction to these words. He pondered. Of course, he did not want to pressure Caroline or demand too much from her, but was it not too soon for him to ask for a kiss? She gently hugs him, tenderly kisses his cheek, and sincerely thanks him for the well-done task. Hercules smiles in response, and a light blush floods his cheeks. She takes a step back, and he sincerely thanks her. Suddenly, the witch joins them, joking that it has become too hot here. Heracles angrily orders her to be silent. Karolina watches this scene, not understanding why he reacts so sharply. At this time, someone in the castle suspiciously notices that he is nowhere to be seen today. Another replies that today he has a meeting with Lady Caroline. The uncle and the priest react with surprise to these words. The priest quietly and somewhat sadly says that being interested in a girl is absolutely natural. Christopher admits that he feels uncomfortable when she talks like that. Uncle said that at first Dee hardly put any effort into work, often lazed around and did nothing, but recently he worked tirelessly, even more than necessary, so Uncle thinks it is quite normal if now Dee decided to rest a bit from everything. Worried, he carefully reviews all the papers and says that the war could start at any moment. They were gripped by panic and began to excitedly talk about strange events happening on the Persona Peninsula. Although there is no convincing evidence right now, everything cannot be ignored. Action must be taken before the situation gets out of control. It is worth gathering everyone and discussing this issue together. Uncle said that first they would visit him. Christopher jokingly replied that he was just a nuisance and called Uncle a smart guy. Together they entered the room, politely asking if they could take a moment of his time. What they saw next surprised them. Hercules comfortably settled, resting his head on Karolina's lap, and reads the book with admiration. Meanwhile, Karolina wonders if it would be more comfortable for him to sit. When Karolina noticed her father, she was overcome with fear, and at that moment they both screamed in terror together. Heracles remained calm and paid no attention to it. After the conversation, Hercules, still kneeling on Caroline's lap, wonders if they really want to expand their army. Someone present suggests focusing on the navy first, while another insists that strengthening the land forces should come first. They glare at each other sullenly. Hercules boldly tells Karolina that these old people scare him, but she calmly assures him, as long as she is near, no one will dare to hurt him. Hercules stood up and reported that last year, almost all additional profits were spent on state-owned companies. It is very important to water the fields, repair fortifications, build aqueducts, and develop medicine. Without a strong foundation for the state, it is impossible to create a strong army. He says that the mood in society must correspond to the circumstances, although at the beginning of the year, he himself wanted to increase spending on the army. He believes that people must be ready to defend their native and picturesque country. Heracles admits with a smile that he planned everything carefully in advance and thought through every step. However, the army of this country is so weak and confused that it cannot be changed. Those two stand before him and look confused, overwhelmed by fear. Heracles says that although there are differences between races, they live in unity thanks to a peace treaty. However, each can separately start collecting money, not paying much attention to these differences. He understands that the army needs to be strengthened because it is currently too weak for defense. The uncle notices that despite all their talks, something unusual is still happening around. Hercules directly asks if this really concerns the Persania Peninsula. Everything becomes clear to him even without hints. He reports that it has already been possible to confirm suspicious and unregistered operations of the wheat and iron guilds. In addition, buyers at traders and intermediaries increasingly notice an unusual number of mercenaries who have started appearing near them more often. When Heracles tried to find out why everything had changed so much, he noticed that the thread of the investigation leads to the Persania Peninsula. He says that the guys from Persania are so confident that they think it is enough to put some child on the throne and they will immediately defeat him. They do not even think about possible internal disputes because they consider it a waste of time. Hercules relaxed on the sofa and confidently stated, sooner or later they will attack them anyway. In his opinion, spending money to strengthen such a weak army is a futile endeavor. He sighs and admits that all this is very difficult for him. Karolina listens to him attentively and says, if the army of the Lemuria Empire becomes stronger, she promises him a reward. Heracles instantly jumps to his feet, addresses Galphus and Christopher, and calls on them to act together. He immediately takes the initiative and begins a brief strategic meeting. Christopher thoughtfully looks into the distance, feeling that everything around seems simpler than before. Galphus silently watches him, understanding that this is exactly what he hoped for when he entrusted everything to his daughter. Heracles tells everyone that after the financial reform, they have funds left. Currently, the army of the Empire of Lemuria includes approximately 20,000 heavily armed horsemen and archers with long bows. In addition, they have nearly 100 powerful warships. Finally, the moment came to consider declaring war to reclaim the lands lost under the previous ruler. Hercules asks Galphus if they need more reinforcements. Galphus thinks for a moment and replies that he would like to believe they have enough cavalry, but in reality, he is worried even about these units. He says that they have at least 10,000 infantrymen, but if he could, he would ask for even 20,000. Hercules immediately replies sternly that he should not ask for more, they cannot afford that. Galphas sits thoughtfully, because he is sure that nothing can be changed anymore. Meanwhile, Hercules turns to Christopher and asks what happened to the fleet. He says that overall he is satisfied with the state of the naval forces, but admits, many ships are already operating at the limit of their capabilities, and they need to be updated. So if military spending is reduced, influence over the seas will significantly increase. Heracles clarifies, does this mean that everything will remain as before? Galphas shares that their fleet has not engaged in naval battles for about 20 years, but now they urgently need to gather an army. This greatly worries Christopher. He irritably asks what exactly is being discussed. He loudly declared that if they do not maintain control over the sea, the imperial capital will be impossible to defend. In his opinion, the fleet must be the priority now, but Galphas disagreed and insisted on strengthening the army, believing there was no point in worrying about the parasites. Hercules silently listened to them, reflecting on what he heard. He understood. The subordinates' words made sense, as the warriors truly deserved more attention and funding. The army of the Lemuria Empire is divided into two parts. The army was commanded by Galphas, and the fleet was commanded by Christopher. Initially, Lemuria had a standing army numbering 100,000 infantrymen. The cavalry was supplemented by new warriors, or mercenaries, from allied tribes. The main army was distinguished by excellent training and easily adapted to any combat conditions. This was the key to the Lemurian Empire's rapid expansion of its borders. But when Hadrian III was emperor, the number of warriors significantly decreased. It turned out that he completely disbanded the infantry and assembled a new army consisting only of heavy cavalry and archers. Although these units were less mobile, they demonstrated high effectiveness in battles. Heracles is convinced that it was a wise decision to reorganize the army by appointing these fighters instead of horsemen. At that time, the soldiers were mostly simple peasants, and some of them were allied mercenaries from other tribes. In the army of Hadrian III, even yesterday many soldiers lacked the simplest equipment, but they stubbornly held their positions and did not retreat. However, despite all their courage, victory remained unattainable. Hadrian III saw his army weakening. Soldiers were dying one after another. There were no reinforcements, and over time defeats became more frequent. Money continued to be spent on luxurious horses and expensive ammunition. Soon, due to such extravagance, serious financial problems began in the Lemuria Empire. Thus, the financial situation in the state became very difficult, and now Galphas and Christopher constantly argue and quarrel about it. Karolina returned and asked why not simply hire mercenaries if assembling the main army was so difficult. Heracles pondered her words and admitted that problems could also arise with mercenaries. Mercenaries are soldiers who fight primarily for money. Even the Spanish Habsburgs, who had overseas colonies in South America and enriched themselves through plantations and silver mines, still left the country without money when they sought to maintain a mid-level army at the highest level. For these reasons, as well as due to the lack of a standing army, many people faced betrayal and have painful experience. Niccolò Machiavelli emphasizes that one should not rely on foreign mercenaries, as they are unreliable and can fail at a critical moment. Hercules thinks about how much Tertia has changed. It was once a simple mercenary army, but now they have turned into a true regular military force. From now on, Tertia is nothing like the French reinforcements that once betrayed Machiavelli. However, there is the example of a Swiss mercenary who served France until the end of his life. Another example is the national wars of France. Therefore, it cannot be confidently asserted that all mercenaries necessarily have evil intentions, as Machiavelli once believed. Hercules pondered how Machiavelli often made mercenaries overcome various trials. About a third of his ideas about power arose from personal experience and reasons. Yet despite this, Machiavelli himself had no special talent in military affairs. He says that due to the weakness of their army, hiring mercenaries is like making the situation even worse. He believes efforts should be spent on strengthening the main army. Galphas agrees with this opinion and adds that it is indeed the right step, and they will not rely on outside warriors. Galphas notices that most mercenaries from the fleet cannot ride horses at all, and this annoys Christopher greatly. Christopher replies that their ships are almost unusable. The military treated them so terribly that now the vessels will have to be rebuilt from scratch. They lost control again, a quarrel broke out between them, and each shouted, unwilling to listen to the other. Hercules sternly warns, if they do not stop quarreling immediately, he will make them kiss because the emperor himself ordered so. Everyone suddenly falls silent and quickly takes their seats. Heracles smiles and contentedly notes that this is good, jokingly calling them obedient boys. Heracles says that the fleet is very important and they cannot neglect it. If they stop controlling it, regaining everything will become almost impossible. Therefore, he asks everyone to build ships faster. Christopher expresses his gratitude to him. He further explains that finding another 10,000 horsemen is unrealistic, but he can gather about 3,000 soldiers. After that, he turns to Galphus and asks, "Will this be enough?" Galphus pondered. It turns out that all these problems arose because of a 30,000-strong army of junior officers from the regular troops. He asked if this was normal. He was explained that if the entire army also has 30,000 soldiers, then it is logical, because any army must always have a certain number of junior officers. Heracles shares his thoughts, then passes all responsibility to Galphus. He obediently nods and assures that he will do everything as Heracles wishes. Christopher suggested settling matters with those guys from Persania, and Galphus noted that there might be some difficulties with them. 8 years ago, mercenaries from the Persania Corps rebelled against their master, the Emperor. They betrayed him, became bandits, and ravaged the entire Persona Peninsula. They realized that the ruler was too worried about the slow, heavy cavalry, so he would not be able to repel the light infantry. He was sure the enemy would use the same tactics again as last time. Karolina asked Heracles if they really planned to invade their territory again. In response, Heracles explained that this time everything was different. Their real plan was to make the young emperor suffer and seize state funds. They themselves seemed to lack money, and life is not easy for them. Heracles heard that farmers from the Persania Peninsula suffered greatly from poisons. Christopher and Gulfes gradually realize how serious their opponent is. At this moment, Heracles quietly says that it seems all this happened because of him. While someone was cleaning the castle, a beastman with ears entered the room. Seeing the woman, he growled as if something threatened him. He suddenly grabs her, cold fear runs through her body, but the man assures her there is nothing to fear because he is the boss here, the king of this place. Meanwhile, this man approaches his subordinate and asks how many warriors they managed to gather. He was told that in addition to 10,000 mercenaries, including 5,000 infantrymen and as many crossbowmen, another 30,000 infantrymen and 5,000 light cavalry from various tribes had already been gathered. The man gently presses the girl to himself and says that together they have 45,000 soldiers. He smiles and adds that this is quite good. At this time, Heracles tells that the main among the mercenaries of Persania is a black panther named Dalios. One of the priestesses was slowly walking through the castle corridors, carrying a large pile of papers in her hands. Opening the window, she looked into the courtyard and saw Karolina training with Heracles in the open air. She says that when she looks at them, they try with all their might to fight every time. Christopher Gibbs carefully reviews the papers and notes that they describe in detail how the army formation and the development of new ships are progressing. Afterwards, he asks when the war will finally begin. Heracles explained that due to the increase in wheat and iron supplies, which come directly to them, resettlement will soon begin. They have already started gathering warriors, so preparation for war will take a lot more time. He says that their warriors are well trained, but they need to repair the ships and gather as many people as possible for battle. He suggests making sure that all preparations are done thoroughly. After an important military meeting, all the warriors and masters from the Lemuria fortress received a warning and immediately rushed to their tasks without losing a minute. In the harbor, ships set sail one after another. Christopher said that all the galleys have already been assembled, and now he is carefully checking everything down to the smallest details. He points to a ship and notices that the sailboats are moving quite slowly. Therefore, it is worth adjusting the mast a bit and trying to speed up the vessel during the trial. After all, in a real battle, the ship will be loaded with weapons and armor, and they need to use all opportunities to prepare as best as possible. Moreover, the wheels on the right worked much worse than the rest. Because of this, the ship could turn sharply, and if not monitored, there was a risk of collision with other allied vessels. Fortunately, these problems could be quickly resolved, since everyone clearly followed his orders. As soon as they arrive at the training ground, it is immediately visible how work is in full swing. Exercises follow one after another, and everyone receives their share of blows in turn. Helphus wonders, have the students already become scared after this? He rages with anger and shouts that with such weak troops it is impossible to defend the empire. The enemy is the barbarians who have already taken their native lands. Are they really going to continue living in fear and retreating? He ordered everyone to imagine that he is the enemy army general and said to attack him as if they really want to kill him. He added that no one will return home until they defeat him. Even before the war, everyone was diligently preparing to reclaim the lands lost because of Persania. To encourage the warriors and give them strength, Heracles is now training together with Karolina. They fought seriously. Hercules noticed that Karolina fought with dignity, like a true daughter of a great knightly lineage. Her defense was flawless, and he saw no weak points. Impressed by her skill, Hercules called Karolina the Supreme Knight. Karolina sharply swung her sword, forcing her opponent to instantly jump back. The girl understands that such moves no longer surprise her. She calmly pointed the sword at him and said that a true knight must always remain calm, because excessive emotions can lead to death. He only smiled in response and agreed with her, for before him stood the daughter of Galanos Galphas himself. Suddenly he pushed off the wall and defiantly threw, "How do you like that?" At that moment, his body seemed to ignite with magical fire from within, and all his movements became even faster and more powerful thanks to magical enhancement. Karolina holds the sword, trying to defend herself. Fear is visible in her eyes. Hercules strikes hard, knocks the sword out of her hands, and it shatters into pieces. The girl quietly exclaims, "Oh." Hercules smiles broadly, looks at her condescendingly, and asks, "And what will you do now?" When the attack began, Karolina used her special magic that gave her extraordinary speed. She instantly appeared right in front of Hercules, which greatly frightened him. Without hesitation, Karolina grabbed his clothes and sharply pulled him down. Hercules slowly opens his eyes and quietly groans in pain. Karolina warns him, "Don't think you can relax just because you broke my sword." He awkwardly smiles and says several times that he is lost. After that, he suggests finishing for today, emphasizing that he cannot match her. She exclaims that this is not true and that he was also wonderful. Deep down she knows he really has a true talent for fencing. He says he cannot do more than any other person and believes he will not become better than he is now. Karolina warns, if Kelly uses the spirit power with which they made a contract, even she will not be able to resist it. Elves possess 3 unique abilities: the skill to cast spells, master magic, and communicate with spirits. Witchcraft is a unique gift that allows one to better understand the surrounding world and even influence how it is arranged. This ability is especially valued in healing diseases, in production work, and during the defense of cities from enemies. It is precisely thanks to magic that they were able to build purification facilities so quickly. Magic externally resembles sorcery, but in reality there is a big difference between them. Sorcery was not created for battle. To use it, one must perform complex calculations and speak special words. Because of this, it is not suitable for combat. Magic is quite different. It has no such limitations and is often used on the battlefield. But no matter how hard a person tries or how much effort they put into learning and training, not everyone manages to master magic. Magic comes in 3 main types. The first category is magic inherited from birth. For example, Karolina had a unique power from early childhood. She could move much faster than others. Her magical ability multiplies speed several times, making Karolina extremely agile. Blood magic is a power passed down only through inheritance. This is the unique magic possessed by the Galianos family with their amazing weapon. Everything they touch turns into the strongest weapon. Even a simple fork in their hands can pierce anything. Hereditary magic is a special kind of spell passed down from one person to another. A vivid example of such magic was the power of the emperor, which was passed down through generations to the rulers of Lemuria and was considered the main sign of a true heir to the throne. This is what gives Hercules a psychological advantage over other elves, which is very important during discussions of financial reforms with aristocrats. And finally, the art of spirituality. Thanks to this technique, a person can negotiate with spirits and ask them for help. Spirits are the embodiment of the power and will of nature. If a person makes a special agreement with them, they gain the ability to draw on their might for spiritual practices. All who have made a pact with a spirit can do this. It truly has many advantages. In villages, there often live spirits who can predict the weather. This is an agreement between the parties. One must pay for the use of spirit power. The main drawback is that every time spirit power is used for something, it must be rewarded separately. In his contract, the source of magical power is a special condition. Hercules answers Karolina's question and explains that his spirit is unlikely to significantly help in battle. He smiles and asks if it really matters. He felt relieved because Karolina was unharmed. However, she is about to say something in response. Hercules smiles at her and invites her to return to the room. Just as Tim wants to ask for help, she is already reaching out her hand, and suddenly Hercules sharply pulls her towards himself. She suddenly falls toward him, and the boy immediately sees that she has stopped being cautious. The girl is gripped by panic, and she quickly tries to escape. She says she was sure their training was already over, and he asks in response what happened. Her face turns red with embarrassment. He asks her if it is not time to use her lightning speed. She replies that right now, in such a situation, if she uses this technique, he will simply fly away, and he is unlikely to want that. Hercules asks if she is trying to stay calm. He sighs exaggeratedly and says his hands are already tired from training. Unexpectedly, he starts to sway and almost falls. She asks him to stop, adding that it is unfair of him. Heracles smiles, watching Karolina shy away. He gently runs his hand through her hair, carefully moving the bangs from her forehead. She closed her eyes, her cheeks flushed with an even brighter blush, and her lips trembled slightly with excitement. Heracles watched her with admiration, not hiding his amazement. He notices the pendant hanging around her neck, the very one he once gave her himself. His heart is filled with emotion, for she still keeps this item as a memento of them. Gently taking her hands in his, he gradually leans in, wishing to touch her lips. At that moment, Heracles hears the priestess talking about carefree youth. He angrily asks her what she wants from him. She just smiles, laughs, and jokingly apologizes. Then she tells him that Titus is calling for him. Titus, brother of Heracles, sits in his workshop and incessantly complains about various troubles that have befallen him. He irritably pushed the sculpture forward and indignantly said that he had been waiting for his younger brother for 10 minutes. With irony in his voice, he asked if the younger brother did not have at least a little more respect for the elder. Tit addressed Hercules and said that he understood. When you're waiting for someone, it is hard to concentrate on work. He admitted that while he creates true art, people like Hercules, who do not live by it, only know how to flirt with girls. He irritably exclaims that Hercules is very mistaken if he thinks that he behaves like everyone else. In response, Hercules covers his ears with his hands and blames Titus for everything. Hercules tells him that he has already booked the best spot for his future exhibition. Titus immediately became wary, his ears twitching slightly. Titus immediately calms down, looks at the man with admiration, and says that before him stands an incredibly strong person, a true wonder. Moreover, he addresses him as his dear younger brother, and Heracles wonders in his thoughts. Could there really be such naive people? Titus invites Hercules to sit for a while he himself is making coffee. Hercules is already heading to the chair, but Titus suddenly asks him not to sit on that particular chair, explaining that it is special, although he is not sure that Hercules will understand the reason. He says that it was nicknamed the Cursed Chair. Once this chair belonged to a man who was executed for serial murders. They say that if anyone sits on it, the restless spirit of the criminal will immediately kill the one who dared to do so. At least that is the story Titus heard. Titus proudly shares the story about this chair. More than 50 people have died because of it, as it causes real horror. Hercules asks if it wouldn't be better to hang it from the ceiling, rather than just collecting things as usual. His friend gladly agrees and suggests putting it on public display. Titus is the second son in the Adrien family. He and his brother have similar views on art and like to discuss this topic, even though Titus is only an amateur enthusiast. Although the younger brother became the ruler, it did not affect their friendship. They remained as close as ever. He approaches Tit and asks how His Highness Adrien is feeling now. Tit replies that Adrien still avoids people. It seems he finds it hard to accept that the crown did not go to him. Hercules asks if he can simply receive the crown. Titus replies that it is not worth doing so. If the crown is simply given away, the state may collapse. Hercules addresses Titus and says that he does not need the crown. He asks him to stop joking about it because it is completely inappropriate. He explains that Hercules built a special place, an art gallery museum where one can admire art. Besides this, Hercules discovered a new drink, coffee, which helps to stay alert for several more hours. He has no time left to become the Emperor of Time. Titus enthusiastically says that as soon as he finishes sculpting, he will immediately start new paintings, and shortly after that, he will prepare decorations for a concert planned for next month. He has so much inspiration that he cannot implement everything, so he jokes. It would be good to have his own assistant's copy. Hercules admits that he feels like some kind of Huizon, although he himself does not fully understand who that is. Then he asks not to take it to heart and to forget what he said, saying it was just random thoughts that slipped out aloud. He confessed that once he sincerely wanted the throne to go to Adrien, but after their paths diverged, he simply wished him a good day. In response, he saw only an angry look, and now he is sure Adrien sincerely hates him. Titus honestly tells Hercules that he cannot solve this problem on his own. He admits that he was his father's first son, but his upbringing did not go as it should have. He offers the Duke a cup of coffee and says that no matter how much he worries, it will not help find a solution. After all, the Duke already has 2 older brothers. In this family, there was a second son named Titus, and the third, Adrien. you have probably already understood that he was named after his father. If Adrien later became ruler, he would be known as Adrien IV. Titus said that his father wanted him, as the first son, to be made heir. Perhaps that is why he received his name. The father had great hopes for him, dreaming that the son would accomplish everything planned. However, later Titus realized the father was mistaken in how he showed his love. Adrien was spoiled too often, so he grew up selfish and increasingly distanced himself from other people. Heracles recalls that instead of using his strength for good, he often did the opposite, attacked the children of aristocrats from neighboring families and mocked them. After each such prank, his father had to apologize to the victims and their families, hiding the whole truth to preserve his son's chance to inherit the imperial title. Titus says that long ago he tore his painting into pieces. Hercules thinks they had a quarrel then, since they are fighting now, but Titus insists there was no quarrel. Tit begins to tremble with rage and admits that he quarreled with his father because he reproached him for the drawing Tit made in front of Adrien. It was then that the boy first heard the word groundlessness. Hercules looks at Tit and notes to himself that the boy looks as if he has become a living dead man. Titus says that he became the way he is now because of his father. He believed that over time this would change, but unfortunately, it did not. 14 years ago, he attacked 4 children from influential families, and this event shook the entire empire, creating an atmosphere of anxiety and unrest. Adrien was confident and calm because he believed that his father would find a way out, but in the end, his father simply gave up. Titus turns to Hercules and asks if he knows that his father was a very stubborn and determined person. Titus clarifies if this is really so. He recalls how after that incident, Tit approached him for the first time, looked at his drawings, and said that Hercules was completely useless. After that, Tit never returned. Then Hercules asks if it was from that moment that he began to truly hate his father. He claimed that the first son was of no use, just like the second, when the war was ongoing and nothing was clear about politics, and as soon as the father found himself in a difficult situation, another son was born to him. This was Heracles. His birth occurred at a special moment, and since childhood he effortlessly overcame any difficulties. For his father, he was a true miracle. Since then he gave his love only to him, completely forgetting about Adrien. That is why he hated Heracles. Titus sums up this story, saying, "Here is the happy ending, but Heracles is outraged. Why should everyone be happy here? It all seems too suspicious to him." Hercules notices that his father does not know how to raise children at all, but Titus disagrees with him, saying it is not true and that he himself is proof that the father did well, as he managed not to repeat the mistakes made by the elder and middle brothers. Descendants of royal families were raised on the lessons and mistakes of past generations. If a prominent figure had appeared earlier, no one would have had to go through trials, and even the issue of the financial crisis would have been resolved much more easily. And he also managed to organize a very important sewage cleaning service for the city. Taking a sip of coffee, he thanks Titus and briefly looks away. Titus asks Hercules when they will finally get rid of Adrien. He is worried that his older brother, who craves power, might cut off his head at any moment. Hercules replies that he does not intend to touch Adrien. As long as he behaves calmly, nothing bad will happen to him. Hercules wonders why Titus is so worried about this. Titus asked Hercules if he really thought that his brother would do nothing. He also inquired whether problems would arise if the brother decided to cooperate with the aristocracy that did not belong to the elves. Hercules falls silent for a moment, then sincerely admits to Titus that he understands nothing about politics. After that, he asks him, "What do you think they will do next?" Hercules boldly says that an uprising will not start here. It is impossible. The movement of goods and people is constantly monitored by guilds, so nothing can be hidden. And an attack on Karolina looks even more unrealistic, as no assassin can get past her guard. He smiled somewhat suspiciously and remarked that if he had really committed murder, he could easily be arrested or even killed for various reasons. Titus turned to everyone and asked if there was anyone else troubled by the terrible words Hercules was speaking. Heracles suddenly remembered Karolina. He turned to Titus and asked if he had fulfilled his old request. At that moment, Heracles realized that this was exactly why he had called Titus to him. He pulls the suitcase closer, places it in front of him, and carefully opens it. Looking inside, his face lights up with a smile. He clearly likes the find. He enthusiastically notes that everything turned out exactly as expected, truly perfect. Titus is happy with this assessment and smiles, admitting that he is very pleased to hear it. After that, he asks Hercules where he got such a wonderful design idea. He assures that he did everything exactly as he was asked and wonders if everything turned out well. Heracles replies that everything looks wonderful. Titus asked if it was worth entrusting this position to Karolina after the successful completion of the military reform, but in response he heard that, until it becomes clear how everything will end, it is too early to hand over the position. A light knock came to the door, and Titus came to open it. Christopher and Galphus stood on the threshold, politely apologizing for disturbing the brothers. Galphus reported that now it is possible to start preparing another 30,000 infantrymen and junior officers, and Christopher added that the fleet has already been restored, and now there are as many ships in service as possible. Titus is confused. He cannot understand what is happening. At this moment, Hercules stands up, his face serious, and loudly announces, "They will reclaim the Persania Peninsula, and from this time the war officially begins." The territory of Persania lies on the site where the Empire of Lemuria once was. The main money here is earned from selling grapes, olives, and marble abroad, but even such revenues are not enough to maintain an army of 10,000 mercenaries. 8 years ago, when Prince Hercules was only 4, a mercenary broke into their house because his predecessor, Prince Adrien III, stopped paying the mercenaries the promised reward under their contract. To stop the uprising, he himself took command of the army and began the battle. However, the army led by Dalios was able to defeat him. Eventually, peace was still established, but as a result, the Persania Peninsula had to be ceded. Since that time, the Persania Peninsula effectively became an independent country ruled by mercenaries. At that moment in the Bay of Persania, everyone was relaxing. Some were chatting lively, some enjoying their favorite drinks. One of the vacationers, unable to contain his joy, exclaimed excitedly what a wonderful night it was. But suddenly he choked on his drink when he heard loud bangs from the street. It was a signal that someone was sneaking inside. Everyone began to panic, call out to each other, and hurry to their places. Everyone understood it was necessary to act quickly and start preparing immediately. They come out and see before them the expanse of the open sea, but what unfolds before their eyes fills them with fear. Dozens of ships rapidly approach the shore, completely covering the horizon. Meanwhile, a brutal regime was established in Persania. Poor people are forced to sit on the streets day and night, barely standing and begging soldiers to leave them alone. However, one of Dalios' warriors harshly and indifferently pushes away those who begged for help. At this time in Adelio castle before him was spread a luxurious table. There were tasty meats, freshly baked rolls, and various appetizing dishes. Dalios reads the appeal and understands that people are asking to reduce taxes. With sadness, he notes that many people in this country live in poverty. He confidently says that he saved Lemuria from foreign influence, but in the end they still spent all the money there. Now he curiously wonders, how would they have managed it all without him? He throws the paper aside and grabs the bottle again. He notices that at least the wine here is really tasty, and the food is much better than in Lemuria. A subordinate approaches him and reports that movement has been noticed from the Lemurian Empire. It seems they are planning an attack. He only calmly smiles and replies that he has known about it for a long time. When he was asked if he really planned to attack Lemuria, he calmly replied that they had nothing to fear. He says their opponent is just a 15-year-old boy who does not yet know what real war is. Moreover, this boy is the son of Adrien III himself, and in his opinion, the boy closely resembles his father. Most likely, he will go to pray to the gods or do something similar to achieve victory. He says that the apple does not fall far from the apple tree. Then he asks how they came up with the idea to make the first war so memorable specifically for him. Suddenly, a soldier runs into the room, barely breathing, and shouts bad news to the commander. Enraged, Dalio does not hold back his anger. He grabs the soldier by the head firmly and slams him against the table with all his might. With a barely noticeable smile, he says that he was distracted when they suddenly burst in. Now he will no longer be able to truly enjoy his lunch. The wounded soldier, barely standing and trembling with pain, apologized to his commander and reported important news. The Empire's army had already invaded their land, as revealed by a received letter. Everyone looks at each other stunned and seems to freeze in place from fear, and Dalios at first cannot move at all. Suddenly he enters the others and asks with surprise what is going on here. The soldiers approach the commander with the news. They want to launch a surprise attack, but the commander quickly stopped them, saying that it was already clear. It was more important for him to know from which side the attack began. They explained to him that it all started from the bay. The Bay of Persania was the first to come under attack by the army of the Lemurian Empire. Dalios trembled with anger. He took a deep breath, and bitterness was felt in his voice when he declared that everything was clear to him. Heracles is a real rat. He realized that he had known this before. There was not a single ship in Persania, so it was impossible to prepare for a land assault. If they had at least one ship left, they could have delayed the enemy until their own soldiers arrived. The subordinates remind him that he needs to call a soldier immediately, but he rudely interrupts them, saying that he understands everything perfectly himself. He says that if they are really in the Bay of Persania, they have only two options: either go to the fortress where he is now, or immediately head to the capital. He is currently in the fortress, but ahead lies a long road that will tire even the strongest warriors in heavy armor. Moreover, this man thinks more about strategy than Prince Adrien III himself, so if an attack suddenly happens, he is unlikely to make many reckless mistakes. If he really wants to make a profit, then, according to Dalios, he will definitely head to the very top. He smiles and says that they are still too naive. After all, thousands of mercenary infantrymen grew up here and have been preparing for battles in such conditions since childhood. Moreover, the army has another 2,000 archers, and the entire army is protected by a high, strong wall. He is confident overcoming this wall will not be so easy. He says that the enemy must be met right at the walls and repelled. When the advance slows down, everything will end quickly, and there will be no heavy losses. At that moment, a frightened soldier calls the commander. The soldier reports with horror that the walls of the capital have been destroyed, the enemies have broken inside. He looks confused at his subordinate, not believing what has happened. He asks in fear what he just heard. His military training was impeccable, and he did not expect Lemuria to be able to deploy such a powerful army in this area. He explains that it all happened simultaneously with the unrest in the capital. He cannot shake the thought, did the uprising really start just now? How is that even possible? Dalios pondered what exactly could have gone wrong and finally realized, there really are traitors hiding among them. The street is full of panic, people are panicking, they have started a riot and are attacking the soldiers. People urge each other to flee this country. They do not want to let taxes ruin their lives while someone else feasts at their expense. Everyone around is shouting, demanding to immediately stop this weak resistance. They do not want the imperial army to continue successfully suppressing their actions. It is necessary to gather one's thoughts, calm down, and act decisively. Someone shouted to another to be quiet. He stated that it would be better to give these lands to Lemuria than to continue existing like this. The soldiers must leave this place as soon as possible. At the same time, the soldiers themselves are shouting, demanding that the people calm down immediately. Suddenly something unexpected happens. One of the soldiers suddenly stabs his captain with a sword and kills him on the spot. Everyone is wildly shocked because the traitor is someone from their own unit. Other soldiers also rush at the commander and stab him with their swords. As soon as the commander dies, one of the soldiers, left alone, orders to open all the castle gates because the imperial army must enter inside. Hercules watches everything from afar and laughs with a smile on his face. He understands that the panther just said, children are in many ways similar to their parents. He mockingly asks, so how is it when the apple firmly grips the tail? Christopher, Galfa, and Galonis just silently look at him, each lost in their own thoughts. It seems this joke greatly pleases the storyteller himself. Karolina Galonis told His Highness Hercules that the invasion went surprisingly smoothly. She asked how he managed to organize everything so well. Hercules gladly replied that everything went extremely simply. The man makes a gesture that means money and says, everything is decided by this. Karolina Galonis looks at him attentively, hesitating whether money really decides everything in this world. He explains that Dalios hired people who were accustomed to a harsh life since childhood. They are very loyal to him, so if he wanted to deceive or defeat them, these mercenaries would definitely punish him for betrayal. There still were not enough guards to properly protect the cities. Therefore, Dalios decided to call even more mercenaries from abroad. At first they lured people by promising them twice the pay. He realized what they had planned 3 months ago. Galphus Galonis glanced at him and immediately accused him of bribery. Smirking, he added that he was definitely not the person who could talk about loyalty. Heracles couldn't resist and joined the conversation. He had often said that mercenaries were dangerous to trust. Hercules found several mercenaries, paid them, and sent them to the city. They helped him turn the people against the authorities and incite the townspeople to rebellion. Karolina Galonis wonders how they managed to organize all this relying only on the help of the townspeople. Christopher explains that people had long grown tired of Dalios's rule, and with each day their dissatisfaction grew stronger. Galphus Galonis says that it would have been possible to start a rebellion if loyal mercenaries were nearby, but it took a long time to convince them to switch sides, and now the gates are already open. Hercules says that already 4 months ago it became clear, this invasion can no longer be stopped, it will definitely win. He approaches his friends and confidently states that, in his opinion, they are already ready. Then he suggests meeting Dalios on the best battlefield. Galphus Galonus watched Hercules closely, waiting for his response. Hercules asked in surprise if Galphus really wanted to say something. Frightened, Galphus immediately denied it, assuring that he meant nothing at all. He lowers his head, is silent for a moment, then admits, this is the first time Heracles commands in battle. Previously, all his orders were precise and correct, but now the achieved success seems like a true miracle. He thinks it is best to stay here and defend this advantageous position while it still belongs to them. Hercules laughed and asked if the general of the imperial army really wants to hide from danger in front of his own daughter. Is he really that powerless? Heracles, putting Gulf Galonus in a difficult position, confidently says that now they have all the opportunities to achieve victory. He said that 8 years ago the Persania Peninsula was part of the empire. As learned from merchants, during this time the geography of the region has hardly changed. Galphus Galionus asked if Dalios had bribed these merchants as well. To this, Hercules barely smiled and replied that he always behaves extremely cautiously. Suddenly he hands me a scroll of paper and says that this is a map of the Persania Peninsula. Once he dozed off in the castle library and accidentally came across this item. Comparing his find with the merchant's stories, he realized that almost all the details match. He points to the map and says that in 2 days Dalios plans to attack this city to reclaim it. He advises to start the offensive with archers and choose this hill as the main place for the attack. Behind the hill flows a river, so only the front and rear parts of the position will need to be defended. Galphus Galon receives an order to give the fighters time to dig trenches and prepare for defense. Thanks to this, they will be able to better protect their positions, even if their number is less than needed. Hercules turns to Galphus Galionus and asks him not to worry. He says he is not at all like his father. Galphus Galionus does not hide his surprise at what he heard. Heracles recalls how at 4 years old his father first took him to the battlefield. Even then, he was already wearing heavy battle armor. He shared that after numerous defeats, he learned to flee in different ways, and also often heard his mother and father quarrel with each other. Hercules noticed that Dalios does not know how to govern the country, but despite this, he has already won twice against the empire. However, when Dalios is alone, he fails to win. Heracles addresses Helion from Galpha and says he is ready to carefully listen to his views. First, they will discuss everything in detail, and only then decide which strategy to choose. Heracles suggests acting together, and together witnessing the future victory. Galphus Galon long looked at Hercules. Then he knelt before him, bowed his head, and said that Hercules had grown up a lot. However, Galphus Galionus does not back down. He asks to be given a chance to win this war and promises to dedicate his victory to His Highness Hercules, no matter what it costs him. Heracles says he relies on him, paying attention to Galphus Galion and calling it a true storm of fire. In response, he claims he already understands everything. After some time, Hercules sits by the window and thoughtfully gazes into the distance. He recalls how they were suddenly attacked in the bay, and then the capital was captured. Everything happened exactly as Gallienus from Galpha predicted. Events unfold, as if according to a clear, masterfully planned scenario. Dalios warns that panic may begin in the coming days. The infantry still has 2 days' march to the northern city. During this time, they must complete all preparatory work. Christopher also faithfully defends the bay. Only 2 days remain before the battle begins. Their forces have already doubled, and now they hope to also gain advantage from this war. A demoness approaches the boy and sees that he is still awake. She asks if he needs help, but he calmly replies that it is unnecessary and he does not need help. At this moment, frightened soldiers in Persania hurriedly prepare for defense. Dalios, mounted on a horse, urges his subordinates to hurry. In his soul, he tells himself, from now on Lemuria will no longer dictate to him what to do. Dalios could not hide his rage. He kept saying that Hercules did not take him seriously, and swore that he would definitely take revenge and destroy his opponent. Hercules thoughtfully considers what move Dalios will make next. The rule of triple attack. To break the enemy's defense, attackers must be 3 times as numerous as those defending. This rule proves it is always easier to defend than to attack. Yet attackers have their own advantage. They decide where and when to start the battle, unlike defenders. That is why in wars the initiative is most often with the attackers, because it is easier for them to choose the most convenient moment and place for the attack. Hercules is confident they will act thoughtfully, attack cautiously, and defend wisely to surely win. This is exactly how he envisions their future battle. Karolina Gallienus asks him if this will not allow the enemies to seize the initiative. He replies that in fact both attackers and defenders can be the first and change the course of the battle to their advantage. He says that it is hard to say anything specific about them. They do not defend themselves, but neither do they show aggression, although, in his opinion, they could attack at any moment. They say that because of the actions of the ruler Dalios, the people in the city began to hate him. He could only rule through intimidation and cruelty. But when the mercenaries realize that victory is impossible and no reinforcements will come, they will simply abandon everything and flee into the desert. Karolina Halionis asks him why they are doing this. Isn't it easier for the soldiers to stay with their commander? Heracles replies that for mercenaries, war is just a job he knows well. They are not capable of supporting someone so devotedly as to go to a war in which there is absolutely no chance of winning. He gently ran his hand through her hair and said that money rules everything in the world, so you can't trust it. Heracles explains that swearing allegiance to the fatherland and being ready to give one's life for it does not yet mean creating a real army from such people. He thinks that Dalios wants to defeat him as quickly as possible and does not care about any displays of disrespect to his status, so they decided to anger him a little. The spiritual beast with a bulging eye suddenly loudly declares that it has spotted enemy soldiers. The soldiers of the Persania army confidently advance forward. Hercules asks how many there really are. Then one of the soldiers says that, according to the beast, there are about 40,000 enemies. The soldiers started shouting that the enemies had finally appeared. With indignation, they called them cursed traitors. Galphus Galonis raises his hand and points at something that appeared before them. Heracles notices the flag with the panther and sees how Dalios is rapidly approaching them at a crazy speed. They say that about 28,000 mercenaries serve on the front line in Hercules' army, brought from other countries. On the flank stood almost 5,000 light horsemen from various tribes, and behind moved a column of 4,000 experienced infantrymen. They were supported by another 3,000 crossbowmen armed with crossbows. Hercules notices that this news fully corresponds to what the mercenaries he bribed had already told him. After that, he decides to count how many warriors he has left. The army numbered 8,000 heavy horsemen, 15,000 infantrymen, and another 5,000 archers with longbows. Altogether, their army had a full 28,000 warriors. He notes that their warriors are much fewer than the enemy's infantry, but they are helped by defensive ditches and palisade fortifications, which give an advantage in battle. If they try to cross the river directly, they will immediately fall under a shower of arrows that will rain down on them like a heavy rain during a thunderstorm. Dalios dares to act decisively. Hercules realizes that he has no other way left, so he decides to go straight ahead. He realizes, if everything goes exactly like this, then further fate will be decided only by the true power of their enemies. He addresses everyone and asks them to listen carefully. Today, he says, a new stage of history begins for Lemuria. After this battle, their empire will be reborn. He loudly declares that they will regain their lands and restore their honor. In response, the warriors enthusiastically support his shout, encouraging each other with cries and applause. Dalios looked at him with burning hatred, called him petty, and promised that soon he would make him regret it. He raises his sword and gives the order to start the offensive. At that very moment, the herald informs Hercules that the enemy is beginning to move forward. Heracles ordered his archers to prepare to shoot, then gave the signal to open fire. Altogether, they drew their bows and released thousands of arrows at the enemies. The warriors immediately appeal to the spirits of the wind, asking them to respond to their call and swirl a dance among the arrows. When the spirits control the wind, they help the arrows fly precisely to the target. Thanks to this, the arrows are directed straight into the faces of the enemy soldiers. Dalios laughed and said, could it be that he really controls the same spirits who previously protected him and now forces them to attack enemies from a distance? Elves are famous for their skill with bows. Each of them can shoot 10 arrows per minute. Dalios calculated that about 5,000 archers stand near him. This means that in 1 minute, 50,000 arrows will fly at the enemy. He thoughtfully says that their archers are much weaker than the enemies in armor penetration. However, if 1,000 arrows fly simultaneously straight into the face or open parts of the body, he counts mentally. In 1 minute, that's already 500 soldiers. In 2, 1,000. If it lasts 10 minutes, 5,000 warriors could die or be wounded. Although there were no serious injuries, the danger still remained. This is more than enough to break the will of even the strongest. He watches as wounded soldiers return, and all of them ask for rescue, confessing that they fear death. One after another, arrows rush straight at the enemy, hitting them in the eyes, and the soldiers fall dead. Dalios stands proudly, looking intently from under his brow and thinks, could there really be those here who can surrender so easily? He turns to his fighters and sharply asks what they are doing at all. He said he is not going to waste his money in vain. Everyone around looks at him fearfully. One of the warriors, barely holding back trembling in his hands, reaches for his weapon. He grips it tightly, gathers courage, and decisively rushes into battle once again. Inspired by his bravery, others also join him. Hercules suddenly noticed that someone was heading towards them. He immediately understood. Whoever the fugitive was, death was inevitable, even if they tried to escape. He notices that they hold themselves much more confidently than he had thought before. If everything continues in the same spirit, they will have a chance to reach the enemy archers. He looks around and thinks that time has hardened them. At that moment, Hercules calls Galf Galenus. From the darkness emerged the gigantic Galphus Galonus in massive armor. He approached and asked if the moment for his battle had come. Heracles confidently stated that now was his time. He orders Galphus Galonus to take command of the heavy cavalry detachment and proceed to the designated place. After these words, several soldiers nearby stopped them and noted that due to the heavy armor of the riders, crossing the moat was almost impossible. Everyone understood. This plan was extremely difficult to implement. Galphus Helionis says that he already understood everything, but just in case asks if he understood correctly. In response, the interlocutor simply nods. The soldiers standing nearby exchange confused glances because they cannot understand at all what these two are talking about. Hercules asks at what distance it is better for him to stand. The one, sitting astride a horse, answers that 10 meters is quite enough. Hercules asks in surprise if he is really confident in his words. He turns to His Majesty Hercules, smiles broadly, and asks what he thinks he is. Then he sharply pulls the rope. The horse neighs loudly, calling others to follow him. He decisively orders not to stop under any circumstances. The horse promises that now is the time to show the fruits of their training and spread the glory of their victory throughout Lemuria. Galphus Gallienus asked Karolina Gallienus to stay behind to cover him from the rear. She obediently agreed and quietly followed, keeping a little aside. They loudly order their warriors to disperse because cavalry is rushing at them. Heracles watches from the side and counts carefully. The soldiers of Galliosi do not even suspect that the enemy is actually preparing to break through their trenches. Some among them mockingly say that the opponent relies too much on their horses and strong armor. Dalios looked more closely and finally understood the essence of the problem. He began to shout loudly, ordering everyone to immediately withdraw the soldiers back. But the mercenaries did not understand what was happening and were lost in guesses. As soon as Hercules counted to 10, he ordered the spirit, who was pretending to be Modius, to take away all the illusions. She, a true temptress, listens carefully to his words and gradually removes her spells. The trenches that separated them suddenly disappear. The soldiers freeze in place, unable to believe what they see. Galvest Gallionis told Karolina that Hercules can no longer use the spirit illusion technique. She immediately understood the essence and calmly agreed to carry out his order. Karolina Galliena angrily exclaims that she will tear all enemies to pieces, and Galliena from Galfa supports her, saying that she can burn opponents with the power of her voice alone. One calls for the help of the spirit of Eliges, and the father appeals to the spirit of Amma. Karolina Galonis suddenly speeds up and rushes past the enemies, not giving them a chance to recover. Right behind her on horseback gallops Galphus Galonis, surrounded by bright flames. The soldiers turn to ashes. Karolina Gallienus rushes past, swinging her sword and mercilessly cutting down enemies. Meanwhile, Galpha Gallienus and Karolina approach Dalios from both sides, preparing for the final confrontation. Hercules resolutely urged everyone to move only forward. At that moment, the paths of Karolina and Galphus Gallienus merged, and they continued along a single trail. The warriors of Hercules move forward quickly. The archers tirelessly shoot arrows, one after another, and Galphus Gallienus boldly rushes straight into the center of the battle, destroying everyone who stands in his way. Karolina Geliones follows her father, confidently wielding a sword and effortlessly overcoming the last enemy soldiers in her path. She encourages herself, reminding that she must move only forward. Dalios looked back and realized they would not make it in time. Who could have predicted that the enemy would so skillfully conceal the attack routes using the technology he himself had developed? A thought creeps into his mind. Could he really have been born from that fool? After all, how can a hawk be born from a snake? Dalios smiles suspiciously, as if he has a new plan, and says that interesting events await them ahead. After that, he turns to the sergeant and orders everyone to change their tactics and immediately help the wounded. Suddenly, all of Dalios's warriors begin to flee in panic. Gelphis Gallionis is confused and does not understand at all what happened. Hercules watches in surprise as everyone suddenly stops resisting and scatters in different directions. He cannot understand what made them do that. Hercules watches the events without looking away, and gradually it dawns on him what is really happening. In fear, his eyes widen and he barely whispers, "Stop." Karolina Gallionis is frightened and turns to her father with her suspicions. she feels that the enemies are behaving unusually. The father agrees that he himself noticed strange behavior and asks Karolina to stay alert and not lose caution. Suddenly, an arrow hits a soldier right in the eye. Galphus Galionis and Karolina Galionis look back in fear. One by one, the warriors fall from their horses. Everyone sees. Dalios' soldiers were already waiting ahead, holding spears and crossbows aimed directly at them. Hercules looks at what is happening with horror, while Dalios orders the crossbowmen to move forward. Everyone opens fire with crossbows. Despite this, the soldiers continue to advance. Arrows hit the horses and the animals fall to the ground. As soon as a soldier falls, the enemies immediately run up and together pierce him with spears. He groans from horror and unbearable pain. Other soldiers still try to advance, but the enemies quickly surround them and attack with spears right in the chest. Dalios shouts loudly, ordering not to stop and to go on the offensive. But Hercules' warriors remain in their positions and loudly declare that they will not let any enemy pass. Although their voices are confident, their faces show anxiety. With their stubbornness, they hold on only by will, preparing arrows for battle. Enemy mercenaries swiftly dealt with the archers standing ahead. Karolina Gallienus felt panic engulf her. Galpha Gallienus only sighed heavily, realizing things were bad. Their soldiers were slowly retreating backward. The sergeant reports to His Highness, Hercules, that the first and third squads have already been defeated. The infantry is still holding on and trying to maintain positions, but it is unlikely they will hold out for long. The sergeant asks Hercules to give orders regarding further actions. No sound comes from Hercules in response. The sergeant calls him anxiously, but Hercules remains silent. He is lost in deep thought. Finally, Heracles realized what the opponent had planned. The enemy intended to defeat them using heavy cavalry. He began to explain how he divided the main forces of infantrymen and sent them in different directions, and then subsequently dispatched crossbowmen and warriors with spears. Thus he further slows the movement of their cavalry, which is already exhausted by endless maneuvers. On top of that, a wall of real spirits appeared before them, completely blocking their way. Even if they could hold back the crossbowmen and spearmen, the enemy could release their light cavalry, which would quickly protect the phalanxes and assembled infantry, and then the heroes would be trapped. Deliosa watches him from afar and realizes that her suspicions were confirmed. Hercules really does not have a single backup plan. Hercules said that this is exactly how he is used to fighting, and for him it is a usual matter. The sergeant does not understand why Hercules behaves so calmly, even when the situation became very difficult. He notes that Hercules smiles as if proud of himself. Hercules says that Dalios' plan really turned out well. Heracles asked the colonel if he could take a horse with him. In a firm voice, he added that it was destined for him to win this battle. At this moment, Karolina is fighting with a spearman. She breathes deeply, sweat appears on her forehead. Despite everything, Karolina is still holding in the saddle. She knows it is wrong, but she cannot forget. Her father believes in her. Her horse is also exhausted, yet she must find a way to overcome the enemies. Suddenly, the crossbowman releases an arrow that hits the horse right in the head. The animal trembles in pain, cannot endure, and falls along with its rider. The enemies stopped very close and pointed their spears right at her head. At that very moment she realized things are bad. The soldiers looked at each other and wondered what reward they were promised for capturing the enemy commander. One of them asked in surprise, as if to say, "What is this all about? Before them is just a child." But another disagreed. "It is not so simple here, because this girl is the daughter of the famous Galphus Galionis, the legendary racer on fiery chariots. He is sure that tonight they can make a good profit, because such an opportunity is a true treasure." The third proposed an even bolder plan, to sell the girl at auction. Another soldier nodded and, smiling, suggested going to the commander. But suddenly Karolina Gallienus sprang from her place, filled with rage, and with one decisive move cut off his head. She indignantly declared that she would not tolerate frivolous words on this subject, and would not allow anyone like that to ruin Heracles' plans. She rushed into battle swiftly, and behind her Hercules was already flying forward, loudly urging his fighters to hurry after him. The warriors fully trusted him. The squad listened to every word and bravely descended the mountain together with him. Dalios laughed and wondered if he was really ready to die along with his dear army. All of Lemuria had no more than 10,000 soldiers. Even if the number was a bit higher, it still did not matter. Looking more closely, he froze in amazement and then was gripped by true horror. Before him stretched an entire field, completely filled with soldiers. Dalios did not understand at all what was happening. The soldiers were confused and screamed in panic. This was not at all what they expected. They were not going to face such a thing, and had no idea they were being paid too little for it. Without thinking long, they all fled. A great army of warriors launched an attack on them. Dalios, enraged, called his soldiers fools and sharply ordered them to return to their places, because this was only a phantom spirit, not a real opponent. No one even looks his way, and Dalio, unable to hold back a scream, cannot believe there are so many warriors in Lemuria, yet his own soldiers still retreat, and enraged, he clenches his teeth tightly. The sword of Dalios slipped from his hands, and he lowered his head, depressed and upset. Meanwhile, Karolina Gallienus noticed that the enemy soldiers began to retreat. At that moment, Hercules spoke to her, and she turned toward him at the sound of his voice. He reaches out his hand to her and asks her to trust him. She hesitates for a moment, looks at him, and feels a little shy, but eventually she takes his hand, and he effortlessly lifts her, seating her beside him on the horse. She returns to him and sincerely apologizes. However, he interrupts her, smiles, and says that, for a first fight, she is holding up well. She raises her head and cautiously asks if she is allowed to ask something. Heracles listens attentively, ready to answer. She asks him why he did not tell her that Lemuria has such a large army. She is convinced that if they had used all their forces from the very beginning, the battle would have ended very differently. Heracles smiles and assumes that these are probably the same mercenaries he bribed in advance. Karolina Gallienus looks closely at the group of warriors and suddenly sees them dissolve into thin air right before her eyes. Suddenly, all the warriors before Karolina Gallienus' eyes seem to dissolve into thin air. She immediately notices that in reality, very few of them remain, and understands that what she just saw was only an optical illusion. Before Hercules suddenly appeared a woman devil. She declared that he would have to pay for the created illusion. Hercules calmly nodded in agreement and asked her to disappear quickly. The woman smiled mysteriously, vanished into the air, and said she would return to him. Heracles explains to Karolina that defeating 40,000 warriors single-handedly is almost impossible, but if the enemies believe they have already won and lose their thirst for battle, then the situation will change drastically. He says that after such a failure, Dalios will no longer be able to gather strength for a real defense. Everyone understands without words what the end of this battle will be. Hercules shouted to Galphi and his Gallienus that the moment to retreat had come and ordered to return to base. In response, the Gallienus said he trusted Karolin and handed the soldiers over to Hercules' protection. He approaches him and says that he will be delayed a little longer. In his eyes, anger and desire for revenge are clearly visible. Hercules turns to Karolina and says that he understands everything. He asks to make sure that there are no traces or rumors left and that nothing unnecessary is done. Jelpha's Galon nods in response, indicating that he has heard the task. After that, he suddenly bursts into flames. Soldiers surrounded Dalios from all sides, pointing their swords at him. So the first war that Hercules led as emperor of the Lemurian Empire ended with his complete and indisputable victory. The Lemurian army won, losing almost none of its fighters, while Persania lost all of its mercenary infantry. When the war ended, it was time for cleansing. People are treated, all weapons are gathered together, and tents are set up around. Soldiers sit down to eat hot food for the first time in a long time and finally feel peace. Hercules was sitting in a spacious hall, carefully writing something in a letter. At that moment, Galphi Gallion approached him and said, "He has already been brought." Dalios enters the tent, holding his head high. Karolina Gallienus follows him, and opposite them Galpha Gallienus is already waiting. Hercules was surprised because he expected stronger resistance from Dalios, but he behaved unexpectedly calmly and silently. Dalios says that after such a heavy defeat, no soldier will want to obey him anymore. They are not united by family ties or the power of authority. Dalios looks at him with admiration and addresses His Highness Hercules. He admits that he really underestimated his strength, and now it is clear that this is his defeat. Dalios apologizes for his behavior and asks to accept his guilt. Galphus Gallienus became angry and exclaimed indignantly how he can speak with such confidence while in chains. Hercules only laughed in response and agreed. This time the victory went to him. But if it was a real mid-air collision, he turns to Dalios and asks for his opinion on the matter. Dalios says that in that case he would have won. Galphus Gallienus is so angry he can't even speak calmly. Hercules just smiles in response and agrees with this. Galphus Gallienus and Caroline are delighted and turn to Hercules, not understanding if he really said that. Hercules says that since the moment they first met in battle, he has understood and learned a lot. Now he has become stronger and surpassed his past self. He addresses Dalios and reminds him he previously agreed to admit his guilt. Now the hero asks if Dalios is ready to hear the terms of a peace agreement. Dalios says that all lands will pass into Hercules' possession as a reward. He only asks to spare the lives of his loved ones, whom he raised and nurtured since childhood. Galphus Gallienus looks at him in surprise, and even Hercules cannot hide his astonishment. Galphus Gallienus swears that if he had known what this would lead to, he would never have allowed such confusion. Meanwhile, Dalios calmly suggests they just need to be sent away. Dalios says that only they remained with him until the end. Other soldiers are now free to choose. Each can decide their own fate, surrender to the crowd, or take revenge on the former emperor themselves. Let everyone act as their heart tells them. Hercules rises from his chair, agrees with what he heard, and promises to leave his subordinates alive. At that moment, Caroline Galonus and Galphus Galonus indignantly address him. But Hercules calmly says he will put forward his own condition. Hercules says that the damage they caused to the empire and its honor is so great that it is simply impossible to calculate. He is sure, even if countless heads of his subordinates were sacrificed, it would not be enough to compensate for everything. Moreover, even if his own head were taken off and used as a ball by millions of people, they still would not be free of their guilt. Dalios lowered his head and quietly asked what he should do next. In response, Hercules just smiled at him. Hercules approaches Dalios and says he is ready to become his vassal. Dalios did not expect such an offer and was genuinely surprised. Meanwhile, Galphi Galonus and Caroline Galonus watch anxiously what is happening. Galphus Galonus and Caroline Galonus look at Hercules in surprise and ask what he means. Dali cannot hold back laughter. He always thought Hercules was a bit strange, but never suspected how special he really was. Dalios asks with doubt whether he really wants to become a vassal of the one who forever inscribed his father's shame in history. Hercules only smiles in response and remarks, "Is it really that strange?" Heracles noted that the one before him only constantly suffered defeats and did nothing useful. Because of this, Lemuria lost almost all its strength. Therefore, Heracles thought, why not find a strong and experienced warrior who would be useful to him? In addition, another problem appeared. Now only Galvest Gallienus remains an experienced commander to whom a detachment of 10,000 warriors can be entrusted. Heracles notes that their army is inferior to the mercenaries in skill. Therefore, he decides to learn new skills to become better. Besides this, he plans to pay the reward that the previous commander kept for himself. Dalios turned away and, addressing His Highness Hercules, said, "Joking here is inappropriate. After all, his opponent is a mercenary and might treacherously shoot an arrow in the back." Hercules assured that he is speaking quite seriously now. Dalios wonders what will happen if he says no. Hearing this, Hercules is momentarily confused and looks closely at Dalios' face. After that, he laughed so loudly that it greatly frightened both Galon and Karolina. Heracles addresses Dalios and says that he just made him a wonderful offer. He offered a place under the bright sun. But seeing how he reacts as if he is already tired of the very idea of being someone's loyal dog, everything becomes clear to Heracles. He laughed, turned to Dalios, and reminded him that he warned him he should have shot in the back, but suddenly imperial blood magic awakens inside him. Hercules raises his head and asks whom exactly he is addressing at this moment. Suddenly Dalios began to convulsively tense, as if it became hard for him to breathe. Galphi Gallienus and Carolina Gallienus froze in place, not daring to move even slightly. Delos held his breath. It is hard for him to believe in that incredible magical power emerging from within. He still sees himself as an ordinary boy and does not understand how there can be so much mighty magic in him. Delos thinks that probably the whole reason is precisely in his spell. Suddenly Karolina Gallienus loses strength and falls to the ground, gasping for air. Her eyelids grow heavy, her eyes gradually close, and she slowly loses consciousness. Heracles catches her and apologizes. Meanwhile, Galonus Galphi barely holds onto the edge of the table, trying to hide his heavy breathing. Dalios sharply steps back, bows his head, and breathes heavily. His face expresses genuine fear and horror. Hercules addresses Dalios and assures him that he will not expel his people from the country. He promises to find them new land where they can settle, as their former estates are no longer suitable, and they will have to start anew, rebuilding and cultivating the new land throughout their lives. Heracles smiles, looks at Dalios, and asks if he guesses where it is all going. Dalios begins to understand. As soon as he dared to attack, he immediately fell into a trap, as if a collar had been put on him. Hercules placed his hands on his shoulders and said, "From now on everything will be different. I am counting on your support." Dalios watches Hercules with anxiety, but also excitement. It is hard for him to imagine that the one standing before him is actually the son of that strange Adrien III. Inside the walls of the great castle, rumors began to spread. Supposedly Persania had already been captured. Could it be true? Could Dalios have lost? A command was given to inform everyone about this tomorrow and to start preparations for the festive banquet. His Highness Adrien, brother of Titus and Hercules, learns about this news. Overcome with anger, he begins smashing everything in his path and screams in fury. The servant warned him that if he continued to be so angry, someone would definitely notice it. His Highness Adrien still does not believe that a small country is capable of winning. He is filled with rage and believes that he alone deserves to be emperor more than anyone else. Firmly clutching a black cloak in his hands, he becomes even more determined, and his gaze grows even firmer. All the inhabitants of Lemuria sincerely rejoice that their emperor has returned home. They watch the gates with interest and see a crowd of warriors heading to the city, led by Heracles. The hero solemnly returns to his native city, and around him, thunderous applause breaks out. The local residents gladly greet him, shouting enthusiastically and praising Heracles for his courage and great achievements. They walk across the entire empire, and joyful shouts and applause sound around them. Galvest, Gallion, and Christopher walk nearby, and behind them march Hercules with Karolina. The heroes approach the castle. On the stairs, Crow, Lucanus, and Prince Titus himself are already waiting for them, who immediately notices that they have been waiting for them for a long time. When Hercules returned, he asked if anything important had happened while he was away. Lucanus, a little tired, said that everyone had worked diligently and without any breaks. He says that in Persania they already know about his successes, and everyone there is very happy. Heracles proudly emphasizes, their victory has made him even more respected among the people. Hercules suddenly stopped and began to carefully examine everything around. His friends, surprised, turned to him, asking what had happened. He asks His Highness Titus where Adrien is now. Titus apologizes regretfully and explains that Adrien could not come on this important day. He realizes that he actually does not like being among people. Hercules calmly accepts this answer. Lucanus approached Galaphus Galonus and said that she had heard about his courage and outstanding deeds. However, suddenly she noticed that it was actually Galonus Dalios standing before her. From surprise and fear, Lucanus screamed loudly. Galphus Helionis asks with surprise whether Dalios really wants to refuse Hercules' amnesty, and his words sound quite harsh. Christopher at this moment jokes, saying that they could simply drown Dalios in the Sea of Lemurs. Lucanos asks Hercules in surprise why Dalios is here. He recalls that he was supposed to see his execution before everyone, wasn't he? Hercules tells her that she can consider him her prey in this war. From these words, the woman becomes even more frightened. Then he adds that he is ready to become her faithful servant. His Highness Titus admiringly notes that Dalios has a wonderful body and strong muscles. Hearing this, Dalios sharply turns to him as if about to attack. Kroll shudders anxiously, watching this scene. Lucanus asks Hercules if he really hasn't changed his mind. Then he adds that after all, thanks to their efforts, the war ended in victory. She has already prepared places for them at the festive dinner, so it's better not to change anything. Hercules looks at her in surprise. The crow noticed that Hercules was tired after a long journey. Since there were no important matters today, he could finally give himself a rest. Hercules smiles slyly, thinking that today he can act as he pleases. On this day, he feels true freedom. His Highness Titus noted that they finally won after a long break, so he promised to prepare the best wine for Galphus Gallion. Galphus politely thanked Titus for this promise. His Highness Tit promises he will definitely write an exciting story about Hercules. He invites everyone to the festive table to hear all the details, but Hercules has already disappeared, as if he was never here. His Highness Titus asks where he is now. Lucano says that Titus was just in this place. Galphi Galon looks around and asks where Karolina Galon has gone. In despair, he asks, has anyone seen Karolina? His Highness Titus immediately understands everything and decides that the boy probably went for the reward. Karolina Gallienus blushed and addressed His Highness Hercules. She sincerely admitted that she wore such clothes for the first time. She asks if it suits her to cover her face. Hercules looks at her warmly and says that it suits her very well, you couldn't come up with better. Karolina Gallienus, having put on a maid's dress, carefully covered her knees and, trembling, confessed to His Highness Hercules that at that moment she was truly happy. She pulls the hem of the dress to cover her legs. Hercules looks at her and smiles, saying that she looks very beautiful and that the dress really suits her. Karolina Gallienus felt a chill run through her. She cautiously asked if she could change her clothes now. Hercules pronounces her name in a stern tone and reminds her that he has already explained everything. His words make the girl even more confused and embarrassed. She shyly admits that she is truly just a faithful servant of her master and is ready to do anything to fulfill his will. Heracles happily notices that she is doing well, and she herself cannot believe that all this is happening to her. She really promised a reward if the Lima army proved themselves, but she never imagined that Prince Tit himself would prepare such a uniform for them. She constantly worries that at the slightest movement her skirt will rise, and this embarrasses her terribly. Hercules advises her to start simply by brushing her teeth. Karolina Gelionis inquired what kind of tea he would like to taste. He says he wants black tea and asks if she notices the red can at the very top. She agrees to fulfill the request and promises to bring a ladder, but Hercules asks her to wait and explains that ladders cannot be used here. He tells her that she must solve this task independently and without using magic. With a trembling hand, she carefully reaches for the jar with the tea mixture, while holding it firmly from below with the other hand. A muffled groan escapes from her lips due to the intense tension. She realizes that she won't be able to achieve this way, and decides that if she lets go of the skirt, then so be it. Heracles strictly asks Karolina to take her hand off his skirt, emphasizing that it is an order. The girl becomes very embarrassed but obeys and carefully withdraws her hand. She reaches forward again and again, hoping that there is still at least a little left in the jar, and she is just a little short of reaching it. During her attempts, the skirt rises up. She wondered how one could allow the proud lemur knight to stand before the emperor in such a state. The only thing she wished for now was that he would at least not look in her direction. He watches her attentively, as if wanting to learn a little more. Karolina Gelionis feels this and already understands. She has attracted his special attention. Heracles asks if she is taking too long with such an easy task. The girl answers uncertainly that she lacks the strength to get what she needs. To this, Heracles jokingly says that she is an elf, so she could just jump. He asks her to be serious. Is she really ready to break the order just because she can lift her skirt? He took care of the best clothes so that she would look dignified, and now he sees such devotion to the emperor from her. Karolina Gelionis sincerely believes this, as Heracles fearlessly rushed into battle to save her. At the same time, she often hesitates even in simple things and cannot dare to just offer him tea. She prepares to jump, then with all her might flies into the air towards tea, deciding to thank him for his support. Her skirt lifted so high that everything became visible. Embarrassed, she quickly drops to her knees and apologizes for the delay. Then she immediately goes to prepare tea. Karolina Gelionis notices that Hercules is covering his face and says that she needs to seriously think about the behavior of these respectable people. Then suddenly she realizes what happened and exclaims in horror. She prepares tea, gently blowing on it to cool it down, then turns to His Highness Hercules and says that they still need to wait until the tea is well steeped. Hercules understands that she is angry, but even so she continues to address him with respect. He quietly addresses her, gently calling her by name, and asks her to come over to make peace. She hesitates but finally agrees, moves the table aside, and cautiously approaches closer. Hercules pats his knees and calls her to sit beside him. She hesitates a little, thinking she might be a burden to him, but Hercules only smiles warmly and assures her that everything is fine, that's exactly how it should be. She sits on his lap but shyly looks away. Hercules asks what happened to her since she behaves much more confidently during training. The girl quietly explains that everything is different now. This is not like a usual training. Heracles suddenly hugged her tightly and said enthusiastically that she was very sweet, but she shouted in response that she would not allow herself to be bribed with simple compliments. He sincerely asks her forgiveness, admitting that he probably went too far with the jokes. He apologizes once again, trying to soften the situation. Karolina Gelionis asked if something was bothering him. He did not hide it and honestly admitted, indeed, he has worries. Earlier, all his life he only watched over his father, but now for the first time he went to war on his own. A great responsibility fell on his shoulders, and it weighs heavily on him. He explains that ordinary people closely watch the emperor, follow political and financial affairs, as well as the development of infrastructure. Therefore, he had to win this war so that the people could recognize him. Heracles admitted that after the victory there would finally be fewer people dissatisfied with him, and this thought greatly eased his soul, as if a heavy burden had fallen from his shoulders. Most importantly, Karolina was saved. Karolina Gelionis suggests that he come to the banquet and show himself to Christos and all the other officials in all his heroic glory. She asked him to show the same strength and courage that they had seen on the battlefield. Without hesitation, he bravely approached her. Hercules looks at Karolina with surprise. Noticing his reaction, Karolina Gelionis suddenly doubts her words and hastily apologizes. She thinks that now she should address him as emperor, but it seems she said something unnecessary. Hercules plays with her cheeks, gently stretching them. The girl is surprised and asks what is happening, but Hercules does not respond to her words and just teasingly continues to tease her. Heracles agrees with her. She is telling the truth. If he does exactly that, Christ will not condemn him. He asked her to stay as his maid a little longer. She smiles widely, gently touches his palm, and happily agrees. Their lips meet in a kiss full of love. Hercules and Karolina Gallienus come to the celebration. Christopher points with his hand to the crowd, where Dalios and Galphas Gallienus compete, showing off their muscles. And a little behind them, the shy skinny Kroll stands. Tid himself took this photo. In the center of the shot is Hercules. He is pointing with his hand at Christopher, who is standing nearby, resisting and trying to break free. Galpha Gallonius placed his hand on Christopher's shoulder, and the boy noticeably trembles. Victory remained with Galpha. Meanwhile, Dallio watches Galpha Gallonius maliciously. His Highness Titus continuously inscribes new heroes onto his canvas. Hercules watches this attentively and seems quite pleased with what he sees. Hercules raises a glass in the middle of the hall where a large company has gathered. Everyone around raises their glasses following him. Karolina watches this scene and sincerely rejoices along with the others. Hercules was sound asleep in the thick night darkness. Suddenly, a mysterious woman resembling something unclean emerged from the shadows and quietly called him. He opens his eyes and notices that a demoness is sitting on him. An unusual beauty of the nighttime prevails around. She calmly says that she has come to fulfill the terms of their agreement. Turklis opens her eyes and immediately realizes that it is her again. The devil stands beside her and with a smile notices that she has finally come to her senses. She smiles slyly and says that she called him so many times that she even decided he is probably no longer alive. Heracles asks with surprise what she means, because they are currently in her dream. The girl replies that this is indeed so, and even if he is already tired, the promise must be fulfilled, the rules cannot be broken. She confidently declares that she will get everything she desires, as always. Her lips greedily press around him, but Hercules does not even give any reaction. Her name is Asmodeus, and only he can see her. Asma is a spirit with whom he once made a pact. In the distant past, she was a cherub. She was once an angel, but one day she succumbed to a forbidden desire and lost her wings. Leaving purity behind, she crossed the boundary of human passions and turned into a demon. She is one of the 72 pillars, holds the 32nd place, and has the title of queen. By making a contract with her, one can gain a powerful advantage. However, for this she demands a lot of mana and life force. It cannot be said that Hercules dislikes this. He is overwhelmed with pleasure, trembling and moaning, while the seductive woman takes everything without reserve. However, even in such passionate moments, Hercules asks her to be cautious so that the wild ecstasy does not turn into a deadly threat for him. She says this is only the beginning, but for an ordinary person, overcoming what he experienced with her would be almost impossible. Meeting her, he felt an unknown spiritual energy awaken within him. Not understanding how this happened, he asks, "When did this start?" To which she only smiles mysteriously and replies, "From the moment when nothing was yet destroyed." 5 years ago, a priest praised His Highness Hercules. He noted that the boy completed the task remarkably confidently and quickly, so a bright future is opening before him. Then the 10-year-old Hercules said that in fact anyone from his family could do this. You just need to visit the library once a day, and this will be within everyone's power. Lucano wanted to remind aloud that other emperors had already suffered defeat, but at the last moment decided to say nothing. Hercules feels that every day is the same for him, and he is terribly tired of it. Suddenly, he has a sharp pain in his head, and Luca watches him fearfully. He cannot understand at all what kind of picture is before his eyes. What exact image suddenly appeared in his imagination? Such places have not yet occurred to him either in distant countries or in books from the library. Maybe these images do not belong to our world at all. He has no idea who those strangers were and where the places that appear before him in his thoughts are located. The only thing that is certain is that these are definitely not his own memories. Lucano asks if everything is okay and offers to call a doctor. He waves it off, saying it's not necessary. She notices how pale he has become. Suddenly he starts getting even angrier and shouts loudly. He says that he will rest a little now and skip his turn. He asks her to keep it a secret. She obediently agrees. He reports that the lessons are finished for today. Lucanos reminds once again, if help is needed, one can turn to the maid. Hercules is deeply thoughtful. Suddenly, the image of an unfamiliar man appears in his imagination. He still does not know who he really is. Suddenly, someone begins to knock persistently on his door. Heracles asks to be left alone, but the knocking does not stop. He opens the door and immediately sees Medea in front of him. She greets him with a sincere, warm smile. He thinks in surprise, could she have just appeared here? A twinge of annoyance flashes in his mind. Has no one explained the local rules to her? But her persistent, steady knocking on the door makes him get up and open it. And she stands before him calmly and confidently, as if this is how one should greet. She admits that her choice of clothing was not the best, so she quickly changes from a maid into a light robe. After that, she asks if she looks better now. Hercules reacts with surprise and admiration to her unexpected change. Hercules anxiously closes the door and tries to get rid of the devil woman. He is overwhelmed with confusion because she is wearing clothes he clearly remembers from his past. Hercules still cannot understand who this woman really is. He shudders upon hearing her laughter. Unexpectedly, she appears from above and confesses that what she likes most is seeing surprise on other people's faces. He cannot understand how she manages it so easily, and she, looking at him, suddenly sees. It seems he is still remembering something. He seems frozen. He pauses for a moment, surprised and confused. They openly ask what this girl is even talking about. She replies with a question, who is inside him? This question has long troubled her. She gently comforts him, saying that these memories do not actually belong to him, so there is no reason to worry. She explains that this man and all his memories came from another world. These were stories of his own past, not the boy's. These visions have no connection to the other world and are unrelated to the boy himself. He wonders what other world she could mean. Maybe she is talking about some other kingdom, but the girl denies it, saying that it is not about that at all. She explains, it means a completely different planet, another world living in its own separate time dimension. Heracles asked her how she knew this. She explained that she was the one who gave him these memories. He suddenly grabbed his throat and again asked how she fed him. She thought that he probably really does not remember this. She told that at the very beginning she transplanted this man's memories to him. She was curious who would turn out to be stronger. In her opinion, a man without ambition and pride could hardly defeat one who had great aspirations, pride, and self-belief. As a result, the weaker soul simply disappeared, and all his memories and experience went to the victor. She explained that now he has become his true self, and the soul of that person no longer threatens him. Heracles heard this calmly. He asked her to wait a moment, fell silent for a moment, and admitted that something still troubles him. Then he asked, why did she choose him specifically? She smiles and begins to tell that several centuries ago, a man lived here, who managed to unite all the inhabitants of Lemuria, and it was he who founded the monarchy on these lands. In the past, he was her teacher. His bold ideas about creating a new state always amazed her. She could not allow his country to be threatened with defeat. As a result, this man could have died, but his extraordinary knowledge and sharp mind saved his life. Lemuria saw in him a chance for salvation and the last hope, so she decided to use his help. But now the most important thing is to agree and sign the contract. She flies almost right by him. The man still cannot understand which exact contract the girl means. She apologizes for not having named her own name yet. She shared that among the 72 great pillar spirits she ranks 32nd. Moreover, she is a queen. Her name is Asmodeus. Heracles realizes that a huge human misfortune stands before him. If he agrees to this deal, his whole life will be destroyed. The hero grabs the doors, trying to open them, but they do not yield. He is overwhelmed by true anger. He shouts at the top of his voice, calls for the guards and lycanos, but around silence as if no one hears. Meanwhile, demonic hands are getting closer to him. She presses him to the ground and calmly says that they are now in a dream. In their real world, he is simply sleeping, so no one will disturb them. The young man tries to resist, but the girl, like a true demon, takes everything under her control. She cunningly whispers to him that he will have to give his virginity for everything, and his life energy must confirm this. She says she will make a real man out of him, but he protests, who could like that? She sincerely laughs with happiness, saying that all this is wonderful. She likes people who are full of energy and enjoy life, but at the same time, she wonders how long this spark inside him will last. Hercules almost does not remember what happened next. When he came to his senses, it was already dawning, and he was lying on his bed. He remembers everything well, and does not deny that everything happened exactly like that. Next to him lies she, the devilish girl who gently embraces him. She tells him that after signing the contract, he became an interesting toy for her. He asks her to stop. Inside him, a strange feeling does not leave, as if hundreds of insects are crawling in his stomach. After some time, the man was sitting alone in a dark alley of the village. A stranger in a raincoat slowly approaches him. He immediately inquired about the goods, and the first man assured in response that he had the needed item, but first demanded payment. Then the stranger silently extended a pouch of money. He returns the found item and wishes good luck, because it no longer concerns him. Then he goes his own way, and the man in the raincoat clenches a small potion in his hand and quietly says that he does this for the sake of the empire. While sincere laughter sounds at the banquet and everyone rejoices in the victory, His Highness Adrien quietly rises from his seat and, without attracting attention, unobtrusively goes out into the corridor. He enters the main hall where the royal crown lies on a cushion. Here he declares that Hercules is the emperor, although it sounds rather strange. He complains that Heracles constantly speaks condescendingly and calls him younger. Then he approaches his three subordinates and asks, "Can the empire do without me?" They silently nod, supporting his words. Adrien irritably reminds that it was his father who chose the successor. Without hesitation, he extends his hands to take the crown for himself. Suddenly he hears Lucasen loudly warning, it is forbidden to touch it. His Highness Adrien remains calm and shows no sign of agitation. Lucano turns to his Highness Adrien. Hatred burns in his eyes because he was angered by her interference in his affairs. She says that this item is a great treasure of the Lemurian Empire. It has always been passed down as an inheritance, from one generation to another. Only the Archbishop and the Emperor himself have the right to touch this object. It is not something that can be handled without permission. Suddenly, Prince Adrien raises his voice, shouting that his father chose him, and accuses her of daring to reprimand the Emperor's son. She agreed with him, explaining that the Emperor indeed decided to make him the heir, and that is exactly the opinion he himself holds. She declared that she would once again appeal to him not to try to seize the imperial crown, even if there is the slightest hint of such an intention. If he ignores her request, then he should not expect to hear a prayer for the repose of his soul from her church. She became angry, trembled with emotion, and stated that she would make herself known again someday. After these words, she turned sharply and, taking her subjects, quickly left the place. Those priests gladly say that he simply ran away. Those who were not given a prayer for rest are immediately considered sinners. It seems that he will simply decide to retreat. Lucano thought that it was worth staying alert, just in case. However, he still feels that something seems wrong with himself. A festive atmosphere reigns in the castle. The table is set with many dishes, hot soups, appetizing pizza, tender fish, and juicy meat. Hercules and Karolina Galenis admire the festive table with delight, imagining how they will taste each dish. The cook addresses His Highness Hercules, informing him that he has prepared a luxurious lunch especially for him. At Palazzo Margherita, the hero is already awaited by caprese, calzone with tomato paste, and the table is completely covered with tomatoes, which Hercules loves so much. Karolina Galenis approaches His Highness Hercules and excitedly notes that the dish looks very tasty. Hercules takes a piece of pizza, brings it to his mouth, and bites. The cook holds his breath, impatiently waiting to see if he will like the taste. He says that the dish is very tasty, and this time even better than before. The cook rejoices at such praise and admits with a smile that these words are like music to him. He promises to work even harder and cook so that guests cry with happiness. He reduced expenses on palace maintenance and other infrastructure costs and directed the saved money to truly important matters. For the preparation of dishes, only the freshest ingredients from all corners of the empire are taken here, and a whole family of talented cooks works in the kitchen, whom my father specially invited. That is why all the food in front of him seems the most delicious in the world, although in reality there are also some peculiarities here. He admits that he is already very tired of all this. The cook anxiously asks if perhaps he did not like something, but he immediately assures that the reason is completely different. He admits that at first he really liked the tomatoes, pizza, soups, everything turned out tasty, but later he began to notice that the taste in all dishes was the same. Now he is already tired of such food. With sadness in his voice, he asks if everything is all right and suggests maybe trying something else. At this moment, Heracles plunges into memories of his past. He says he wants to try curry. The cook wonders if it is about the dish care and immediately offers to prepare it, but Hercules stops him and explains that he means a completely different dish. He explains that the word curry is a fairly popular name. Many different spices and seasonings are added to prepare this dish. Curry can be boiled, fried, and sometimes even fruits are added to it. Most often, cumin, coriander, cardamom, turmeric, chili, and fragrant pepper are used to prepare dishes. Sometimes black or cayenne pepper is also added to the food. Karolina Galenis is surprised that such a dish even exists, but the cook says that these spices are too hot for him. If he knows all the ingredients, he will be able to cope with preparing the dish. However, looking at the cook's face, it is clear that recalling the recipe from memory will not be easy for him. Heracles tells the cook that he allows him to look for spices even beyond their empire. After that, he introduces everyone to a new cook named Nala, who greets those present friendly. The first cook looks anxiously at the servant and asks why he came. He recalls how this servant said he wanted to try curry. Since most of the necessary spices grow in his native country, he also brought his own cooks with him. He says that he once really was someone's servant, but then the Church of Messi helped him change his life. Now he feels free. The first cook listens to him and nods understandingly. Cornala shakes the cook's hand, introduces himself, and sincerely says he is glad to meet him, addressing him as the boss. The cook does not hide his surprise at such politeness and friendliness from Cornala. Heracles strictly demands that everyone stop wasting time and get to work. Nala immediately obeys him and acts, while the self-proclaimed cook asks for a little more time. He explains that as the head cook and servant of the Lima Palace, he has his own dignity, so he does not allow anyone outside to enter his kitchen. He suggests first showing what he is capable of in cooking, and only then making a decision. Hercules agrees, considering this a fair approach. In this situation, he invites several people to the table to conduct the necessary inspection together. Hercules loudly announces that all preparations are complete. He has gathered the best judges to benefit the future palace. The moment of tasting has come. Hercules calls everyone to try the dishes. Along with him, there are 7 members on the jury. Each of them must know all languages. To make everything official, he invited Cronal to be the judicial cook. He wondered what that curry would taste like, but who can know? After all, even he himself has not yet tasted this dish. Galphus Scalionis shared that he had already tried the food of the Sindelians. Christopher recalled how he visited Sandalou together with the previous emperor, and Lucano joked that such luxury as a dish with spices is probably not affordable for an ordinary bishop. With a threat in his voice, Dalios says, "Let him just dare to slip something in. He does not even suspect what danger he has actually gotten into." Suddenly she burst into tears and began to ask everyone to forgive her for having to wait. At that moment, he brought 1 large lavash and 3 small cups. He imagines plates in front of him with fragrant chicken curry with butter, tender spinach curry, the dish kimuli, and juicy tandoori chicken. Galphus Galines excitedly notices what a wonderful aroma fills the air. Christopher dreamily says, "What nostalgia." At that moment, bright memories of old times flash in their imagination. Karolina Gelionis notices that the dish looks very tasty, and Dalios, who is a cat, looks at it and thinks that the food is too hot for him. The cook calmly watches without saying a word. Luke turns to Chatson and says that before starting they will pray to the Lord. Lucano quietly says a prayer, thanking the Almighty for what he has before him. All together they bow their heads, sincerely asking for a blessing on the food, that it may give strength to their bodies and bring peace to their hearts. Hercules claps his hands with a smile and says it's time to have lunch. He breaks off a piece of the cake and thinks about where to start. Finally, he dips the bread into the first sauce. He carefully puts a piece into his mouth and chews it attentively. Panther Dalios and Karolina Galionis watch him tensely, waiting for a response. Nala asks if he likes the taste. Hercules smiles and says he likes it very much. He invites others to try it too. One decides to try a dish with spinach, another chooses kimchi, and the third adds to his tandoori with chicken. Only half an hour has passed, and there is almost no food left on the table. Karolina Galionis enjoys tasting the dish and notes how delicious it is. Galphius Galionis sincerely admires and praises the exquisite flavor, and Christopher thoughtfully remarks that this is truly the cuisine of Sindelian. Lucanos only slightly tastes the dishes, noting that enjoying such food is not a sin at all. Kragala wonders why Panther Dalios sits idle and eats nothing, so he decides to ask him about it. Dalios mysteriously smiles in response and says he is just waiting for the food to cool down. Canella, with a light smile, talks lively with everyone, showing interest in various things. The head chef, observing this, feels anxious yet secretly pleased that his dishes probably were liked. He looks a little uncertainly at the dish prepared by the unfamiliar woman and wonders what it will taste like. He does not like spicy food, but hesitatingly breaks off a piece, dips it in curry sauce, and carefully tastes it. His eyes opened wide in surprise when he tasted the dish. Hercules said in amazement, "What a surprise, this is really tasty. I thought it would be much spicier." Nala apologizes and admits that she prepared all this according to her own recipe. Hercule is even more amazed by this confession. He explains that in his country it is very hot, and to cope with the heat they do this. Their body produces cold sweat. When they eat spicy dishes, they sweat a lot, which is why their curry is so spicy. When he eats curry himself, he immediately starts sweating, and it cools him down. He hesitated whether spicy food is liked here, so he decided to add apples and honey to the dish to get a milder taste. Karolina Gallienus admitted that she would like it sweeter, but even in this form the dish was very tasty. Canela says with a smile that he is very pleased to see how the cuisine of his homeland is known and appreciated here. He likes to watch people savor his dishes and smile happily. The first chef recalled how it all began. Back then, he was often called a simpleton and laughed at, saying he would remain a kitchen boy doing rough work, only he had to peel potatoes. He was advised not to meddle in matters not meant for him, and behind his back they condescendingly called him a peasant. but he patiently sat peeling potatoes and secretly read a culinary book, dreaming of a great future. With sadness in his heart, he imagines the day when he will personally prepare a delicious dish for the emperor himself. Hercules raises his hand and says that the moment to make a decision has come. He addresses those present with a question. Whoever wants to try Cranel's dish again, let them raise their hand. As soon as Galonus raised his hand, indicating that he wanted to try a spicier dish, Christopher and Lucano immediately agreed with this desire. Karolina Galionis admitted that she would like the curry to be a little sweeter, but Pantera Dallio disagreed with her and said that the dish was already very tasty. Hercules admitted that he was interested in trying the curry even spicier or adding some unusual ingredients to it. Heracles asks the chief what his opinion is on this matter. The chief thinks for a moment, then also raises his hand. He explains that in order to cook tastier food for the Lemurians, one must first stop grumbling and constantly being dissatisfied with everything. Nala sincerely thanks him for this useful advice. The cook shouts angrily and swears, asking to be informed in advance next time if such a large vessel is needed. The embarrassed boy apologizes and explains that all this is needed for baking tandoori bread. Hercules watches their conversation with a smile, then asks Cronel to bring another portion. He addresses everyone and asks if anyone would like to add something else to the order. Karolina Gallienus says she likes tandoori chicken. Galfa Gallienus immediately joins her choice, and Kimelian also does not refuse to try it. Christopher asks to add more spinach. Lucinos jokes as if asking God for forgiveness for his tasty desires. Meanwhile, Panther Dalios enjoys the food and does not hide his admiration for the taste. The head chef stood up and announced that he would now prepare desserts for everyone. Leaving the room, he walks slowly down the corridor and thoughtfully speaks to himself. Looking at Nalag, he involuntarily recalls his past. He carefully examines the coat of arms of his country and realizes that perhaps he has focused too long on his defeat. He has forgotten the most important thing. Smiling faces of people appear in his memory. He walks forward with a smile and assures that after such a spicy treat, he will definitely prepare cool fruit desserts. He felt someone standing behind him and instantly turned around. At that moment, Hercules, smiling, pats his belly and says he hasn't been so full in a long time. At that moment, the chief enters and apologizes for the wait. He approaches with a tray in his hands and announces that the desserts are ready. Hearing this, Hercules is very happy. He brings sliced melon and apologizes once again for the delay. Hercules takes a piece, tastes it, and enjoys the juicy flavor. He smiles broadly and says that after spicy curry, such sweetness is a real pleasure. For him, melon is a true delicacy. Karolina Galenis happily watches how much he enjoys it. Nala treated everyone to juicy melon. Everyone gladly took pieces and eats, smiling. Only Panther Dalios looks cautiously at his piece and does not hurry to taste it. Hercules was about to finish the last piece, but suddenly something disturbed him. He noticed a puddle of strange liquid under the fruit. Heracles suddenly shouted loudly, ordering everyone to stop the feast immediately. All the gathered people confusedly raised their heads and looked at him in surprise, while Heracles himself hurriedly tried to induce vomiting. Karolina Halionis suddenly rushed to help Hercules, but Panther Dalios quickly grabbed the girl, pulled her back, and hit her hard in the stomach. Christopher and Lucano stood frozen, their faces twisted in genuine horror. Karolina Galionis couldn't handle the tension. She suddenly felt sick and nearly fell. Galfa Skelionis begins the battle with Pantera Dulios and exclaims indignantly how he dared to behave like that. But suddenly Hercules stops Galfa and says not to eat the melon because it is poisoned. Everyone around anxiously asks if His Highness was poisoned, but suddenly someone quickly stops the one who spoke, reminding that such things must not be spoken aloud. They say someone secretly poured poison into his favorite melon. Now everyone is worried about him and wonders who could have dared to do such a thing. The woman suddenly rushes forward, and the maid hastily blocks her way, saying, "Princess, where are you going?" But she confidently replies that she needs to speak with Hercules immediately, and she hurries to him. But the servant explains to her that he cannot do this because the former emperor strictly forbade him to act this way. Evdokia is the mother of Adrien and Hercules. She sincerely believes that it is Hercules who can change the future of their country. However, for her, he is above all her beloved son. Therefore, she cannot help but worry about him and his fate. She is very upset and cannot understand how all this happened. In despair, she begs the Lord to help her son. Lucano carefully examined Hercule, checking his temperature and pulse. Everything was normal. He found no abnormalities. Hercule sighed with relief and noted that he was lucky. He did not manage to bite the spot where the poison had gotten. Christopher wonders with surprise. Who could have guessed that someone would deliberately poison a melon? Heracles suggests that most likely small holes were made in the melon, and a bit of tested poison was introduced through them. If they hadn't noticed how this poison reacted with the silver plate, he might already be lying in a coffin. He turns to Panther Dalios and thanks him for everything. Dalios only smiles in response and says he just noticed the rust on his armor. He points to Karolina and says that next to her is a person who cannot take their eyes off her. Karolina Galliana only sighs and quietly admits that she has no idea what can be said here. Galphus Gleonis apologizes to Hercules and admits that he felt devastated when his daughter was hit by a former enemy. In response, Hercules says that he fully understands his feelings. Galphus Gelionis thanked Pesic Dalios with all her heart for saving her daughter, but he didn't even look her way. He just turned around and loudly passed gas. Hercules shifts his gaze to the main enemy and directly asks if he really wanted to kill him. The cook, overwhelmed with despair, looks up to the sky and begins to get nervous. He says that he always puts his heart into his dishes and would never dare to harm his own creation, let alone the emperor. Then Hercules asks the cook where he got this watermelon. At first he looks at the boss's tents, then says that they were brought by Her Highness Adriana's assistant, Mr. Domenico. He told how he met him in the corridor when he was heading to the kitchen. Then he was informed that they planned to celebrate His Highness's victory together. Galonis of the Galfa family says that his family has aristocratic origins and is closely connected to His Highness Adrien. 4 years ago, when the land tax was raised, his anger was unleashed on everyone around. Christopher adds that it was from that time that Galonis began to support Adrien. Therefore, if all this is really his doing, such a development of events is quite possible. Lucanos hesitated but finally gathered his thoughts and confessed to Heracles that this could be important evidence. He told him about the crown. Everyone immediately froze in surprise and began asking if he really wanted to touch the crown, as it is considered a crime. Now it became clear why he was not at the celebration. Lucanos asked if they would be searching for Dominic. Hercules replied that it made no sense. Dominic is merely engaged in importing and exporting fruits, and even if they question him, it will not help them at all. The chief loudly called Hercules, insisting that he knew nothing about the poisoned watermelon and was innocent in this matter. He sincerely asked to be trusted. The palace also defended the chief, noting that he was an honest man. As a sign of support, he shook his hand. Hercules said irritably that he understood, he was simply used. But now he is no longer 100% sure of this, and until the doubts disappear, he forbids the cook from appearing in the kitchen. When the chef heard these words, his face immediately became gloomy, and the cannoli darkened. The guards lead the chief away, and Cranala follows them. Hercules approaches Karolina and speaks to her. He learns that she also ate the poisoned melon. Hercules reminds Karolina that he had suggested she rest. He does not understand why she did not stay in bed and came here. Karolina Gallianus replied that she cannot sleep peacefully while Hercules is in danger. She loudly declared that she must be by his side right now to protect him. Suddenly he gently pulls her to himself, lays her down next to him on the bed, and covers her with a blanket. She feels her cheeks flood with a shy reddish blush. She tries to resist, but suddenly the Panther Dalios got scared and jumped back sharply, because at that moment the door unexpectedly opened. A woman entered the room and immediately began to apologize for bursting in without permission. An anxious woman approaches them and asks with concern how he feels. Gallian Galfa immediately recognizes that it is Maria. Karolina cannot hide her surprise and shudders. She sees her mother. And indeed, it was Maria, the wife of Gallian Galfa and mother of Karolina. Galphus Galonis is angry because he warned her not to appear here, but the girl says she was too worried about him, so she came. Heracles quickly calms her down, saying there is nothing to worry about, while Karolina Galonis looks around excitedly, realizing she is exactly on Heracles' bed. She carefully takes Hercules by the hand and apologizes for her husband and daughter being unable to help when it was necessary. The woman asks if she can be of any use to Hercules. In response, Hercules asks her to convey his thanks to Pantera Dalios, as he was the one who saved her daughter. She took a few steps forward, bowed deeply to Panteri Dalios, and thanked him from the bottom of her heart, but in response, he just turned away and snorted irritably. She picks him up and starts saying that his muscles remind her of those her husband had. Panther Dalios does not understand at all what she wants from him. Mary returns to Hercules and asks if he is still hungry. She offers him to try bean and garlic soup. Hercules responds with a smile and agrees. Lucano supports this idea and explains that garlic can help get rid of poison. He advises Hercules to consume more garlic soon. Hercules is delighted and asks Karolina Gallianus if she will stay by his side. She says a little awkwardly that she does not like garlic very much. At that moment, he raises a spoon to her mouth and asks her to open it. She tries the soup and at the same time thinks that in such a situation she cannot even help him. Mary watches all this, barely smiling. She quietly approaches Hercules and whispers to him that Karolina Gallionis is still innocent and has never been with anyone. At that moment, Karolina almost chokes on the food. She claims that she really found time to talk about this topic. She said she worries about her future. Supposedly, she is too obsessed with martial arts and does not pay attention to other important things at all. She is concerned whether she will ever become a wife. She repeatedly reminds about her promises, but even Galen Galfi is convinced. Such conversations really matter a lot. Caroline was a little embarrassed when Bari Hag praised her, calling her very cute. However, she quickly turned to him with a request not to continue, because right in front of them stood the emperor himself. Hercules recalls how after that old story with his brother, which happened more than 10 years ago, their father began to treat child-rearing differently and allowed him to see his mother less and less often. He forbade them to address each other as father and child, and since then their meetings became purely formal. Even after the father's death, this alienation did not disappear from their relationship. She continues to visit him, but when the emperor fell ill and lay with a fever, she never came to find out how he was feeling. Therefore, it is quite understandable why she will not come now. He convinces himself that he should not be upset about this. But suddenly the voice of his mother sounds, and his thoughts are interrupted. The servant behind apologizes, explaining that he tried to stop her. At that moment, Hercules addresses her, calling her mother. Christopher explains to his sister, the princess, that this is forbidden. She does not accept the decision of the former emperor and openly disobeys. Evdokia strictly demands that her brother not interfere, while Heracles, on the contrary, wishes to discuss it with him. Heracles orders them to stay away from their mother. She falls to her knees before him. Heracles begins to think the matter is serious. Besides the fever, someone is trying to poison him. And of course, the mother appeared just now when her son is in danger. She says she came to talk about everything that happened today. The girl asks if it has already been possible to find out who was involved in this. Heracles says he is almost certain of his brother's guilt, but has no evidence. Evdokia raises her head in fear. Hercules realizes that to their mother, both he and his brother are equally dear, yet the brother really went too far. However, even despite this, most likely she will act as their father once did. Evdokia begs not to harm his majesty. Adrien Hercules first freezes in surprise, but when he understands the true reason for his mother's visit, his eyes become dull, as if the light has gone out in them. Everyone around looks scared as she tries to justify herself. She explains that Your Highness Adrien became such a person only thanks to daily hard work. The woman emphasizes that she has always cared about him, and that is precisely why she came to him today. She believes that he acted impulsively and did not intend to cause harm. He is also her own brother, so she sincerely asks to give him a chance and not punish him harshly. Heracles asked if she had come just to find out how he was doing. She only looked surprised, not understanding what he meant. The young man continued, emphasizing that she could do nothing to him because she had no evidence. Hercules tells Eudoxie that as emperor he cannot simply ignore what happened. Therefore, Adrien will be brought to trial. She looks at him with frightened eyes, tightly holds his clothes, and begs him to save her son. Christopher tries to calm her down, but the woman does not stop and again pleads not to touch the boy. She fiercely shouts the name Hercules. The hero glances quickly at his mother and confidently says he will do everything in his power. The mother freezes, her face filled with horror. She stood up, lowered her hands, and quietly walked away. On the way, she said that maybe she would go to a monastery. Hearing this, he asked her again if she really decided that. She says that she will pray for the peace of her husband's soul, for the guilt of her son, and for her own sins. She admits that she did not hold her son back from the mistake, and now she leaves everything to God's will. Her words cause genuine horror in everyone. Hercules looks at her with a smile and says he will not argue if she has already made up her mind. He is curious to know what she decided. As she leaves, the girl calmly informs that she made her choice long ago. She said goodbye to him, carefully closed the door behind her, and left. A tense silence settled in the room while Karolina Gallionis was calling Heracles. Hercules announces to Galen and Christopher from Galfa that an important meeting will take place today. He asks them to urgently gather everyone. Galen and Christopher immediately get to work. At the end, Hercules informs that Adriana will be judged at this council. In a burst of rage, Adrien grabbed scissors and began destroying everything around. He loudly shouted why his brother was so strong and why he could not just take and die peacefully. The servant told Adrien that his mother came to see him, but Adrien ordered not to let her in and to drive her away. He was sure that his mother came, as always, to force him to do things her way. He is annoyed that the other is also trying to gather the elders. If he manages to win over the aristocrats with kind words, all previous efforts will be in vain. It seems he himself has become the embodiment of this struggle. Heracles gathered the people and addressed them, calling them honorable fathers and those who only dream of becoming such. He warned, their country is threatened by danger. He says that heretics and enemies have already taken part of their territories. If this continues, they may lose absolutely everything. Hercules says that the time has come to finally take the place they deserve, the very one for which his grandfather once fought. Now, with a strong army at his disposal, their chances of victory are very high. He clenches his fist, solemnly raises his hand, and declares that he is starting a war to reclaim the lost lands. Shouts and approving cries explode around. Everyone eagerly supports his resolute intention. The tension inside him only intensifies. Looking at the portrait where he is with his father, he asks himself why his father never entrusted him with the crown. He sits in an empty room, overwhelmed by despair. Broken things are scattered around him, and the tightly drawn curtains only emphasize the atmosphere of disorder and chaos. In the deep night, Adrien lay calmly in bed when suddenly a strange sound woke him. He became alert, raised his head, and listened. In the silence, he clearly heard someone's creak. Before him appears the bright soul of a girl with short hair. She looks at him directly in the eyes with interest and openness. Adrien looks at the girl in surprise, who greets him with a slight smile and says, "Good evening. Isn't this night magical?" The boy's cheeks immediately flush with a blush. He sharply asks who else she could be, but she only smiles mysteriously and says she thought that such a way of greeting is liked by people. Suddenly she spreads her wings and announces that she is an archangel, as well as the first among the three pillars. Her name is Jabidi. Adrien does not believe what he sees and asks in surprise if she is really an archangel. The news shocks him so much that he immediately falls off the bed. She laughs and asks if it is the first time he has seen an angel. The boy awkwardly replies that he never imagined heavenly beings could look exactly like that. She approaches Adrien, gently embraces him, and says she carries an important message for him from God himself. She says that soon Heracles will set off on a long journey to the principality of Trebusos. She says that thanks to his successes and the capitulation of Panther Dalios, he has gained wide support among the people. Now his goal is to reclaim all the territories that were once lost. She says that the recent meeting of the nobility was held precisely because of this matter. Meanwhile, he is annoyed that Heracles has already become arrogant after only one victory. Adrien raised his head and asked where they got this information from. She calmly replied that she found out everything herself. She once again emphasizes that she truly overheard their conversation by accident, as she had said before. Afterwards, they agreed to jointly draft a plan regarding the principality of Trebusos. That is why everyone gathered here, to discuss together what steps to take next. Heracles suggested starting the analysis with Dalios. It was important for him that Dalios learn to analyze the defeated opponent. Heracles wanted to know what Dalios himself thought about it, and he replied that everything was already clear to him. He justifies his defeat by the fact that there was no one nearby to whom he could entrust the leadership of such a large army. If someone else were nearby, the forces would be distributed differently, and they could defend more effectively and repel the enemy. Pantera Delio confidently asserts that he had no opportunity to choose another commander. Heracles asks why he made such a choice. He explains that he cannot rely on mercenaries. They are very easy to buy with money, and in case of danger, they can switch to the enemy without hesitation. The emperor himself has already demonstrated this firsthand. Heracles proudly agrees that everything said is true. Hercules noticed that if there was a plateau ahead, they would easily overcome Pantera. Dalios then asked who among the fire force fighters would lead the group in that case. Heracles admits that he lost because he took lands from his own father, and he sees this as the main reason for his defeat. He says that he understands the interlocutor's action and supports him, but he adds, all this is in vain if after that one does not start acting for the good of the country. He explains that there is no point in conquering new lands if you do not know how to govern your own country. Hearing this, Panther Dalios awkwardly looks away. Heracles laughed loudly and confirmed that it was true, but he promised that he would not allow such a thing to happen. He would do everything properly, and Panther Dalios would have to really strain himself. Heracles notes that they have already heard the point of view of Panther Dalios, so now he suggests talking directly with the Lemurians. Galphus Galonus noticed that when recalling the same battle and the words of Hercules, it becomes clear the chosen strategy was quite correct. Heracles says that the biggest problem now is the weapons. Karolina Gallienus clarifies his words, and Heracles confirms once again, yes, indeed, he means weapons for the infantry. He recalls how in the battle for Persania, most infantrymen fought with swords and shields, and one part of the soldiers carried long spears. These spears are called serises. They were invented by the Lemurians many thousands of years ago. Thanks to their length, reaching 5 meters, they are much more convenient for horsemen than ordinary swords. But during the last battle, he realized that he had made the wrong decision. The warriors were striking the spears against the ground, and these spears were not suitable for close combat at all. Because of this, the formation quickly broke up, and most warriors threw their spears to switch to swords. Their kingdom is surrounded on all sides by deserts, wide plains, and mountainous territories. Among the enemies are nomads and mountain people who know their land in detail and can adapt to difficult conditions. If suddenly our heroes find themselves in a place where due to complex terrain they cannot use their weapons, it could turn into serious problems for them. But it is not always possible to separate the weapons due to some restrictions. In such situations, it is better to take spears because daggers will not help much here. They need to find something that would be 7 meters high so that enemy horsemen could not reach them. Moreover, they will need shields that protect against enemy arrows. Such a distance gives an obvious advantage, but at the same time this equipment must be light enough to carry comfortably, not disrupt the formation, and be able to hold the shield. The leader asks his comrades if they have any ideas about weapons that would meet all these requirements. Everyone fell silent, feeling the tension, because no one knew what exactly the request was about. In this deep silence, Panter Dalios suddenly spoke up. Maybe we just use everything at once. Galphus Helionis says that talking is always easy, but carrying out the plan is almost impossible, at least that's what he thinks. Then Panteraldios asks, if even the emperor paid attention to this issue, what then can people like us do? Heracles suddenly remembered something. His words made everyone wary, as he declared that now they would strengthen their army. From now on, training would continue without stopping until the very campaign. At that moment, Gibril secretly eavesdrops on their conversation. In Adrien's room, she explains that their preparation proceeds exactly like this, step by step. Adrien calls his brother confident, although in reality he doesn't care about all these soul techniques. But then Gibril says that their mission will fail. He asks what she means. Gibril explains, to reach the Principality of Trevisos, they will have to sail by sea. However, these unfortunate people found themselves right in the middle of the enraged spirit storm, and they had no chance to save themselves. The waves caught them and dragged them straight into the abyss. Eventually, they all inevitably drowned, helplessly struggling in the raging water. Adrien cannot believe that everything is happening so easily and asks how this is possible. She explains that it really sounds strange, but in one of the worlds, the army of a mighty kingdom was twice caught in the center of a storm. After that, the inhabitants began to create legends about the god of thieves. She says that Heracles doesn't even suspect this. Now he is gathering his army and preparing to set out on the campaign. Adrien pondered briefly, then simply shrugged and replied that it doesn't matter to him. At that time, Gibril looked at Lee as if he wanted to make sure he was okay. Adrien says that the throne he was to inherit from his father, along with the responsibility to protect the country and its customs, rightfully belonged to him. He says that his father was the dearest person in the world to him. However, the imperial magic that belonged to his father suddenly left him and passed to Heracles himself. Heracles was so surprised that he could not understand how this happened at all. Despite the fact that all the other heirs despised him the most, Heracles was chosen to inherit the power. This was decided by the father, the loyal vassal, and even the inheritance magic itself. He loved his country and father above all. Perhaps he really had more talents, but still he took absolutely everything from him. When his mother saw the magical seal on him, she told him to follow Hercules' instructions. But in reality, both his father and mother, and the crown, all of it was his, and was meant to belong only to him. Then he decided to take revenge on the one who took everything from him. The only thing he wanted now was to get back what belonged to him. Gibril smiles and says that this man has already endured a lot in his life, but now everything has changed, because the master himself is now on his side and protects him. She adds that he does not understand this yet, but soon he will embrace his true place and become the person who will lead the empire to prosperity. She suddenly grabs his hand, pulls him closer, and assures him that when it happens, she will definitely thank him with something special. Adrien asks Gibril to stop and wait a little, but she does not hear him and stubbornly continues her actions. He cries out in despair, asking if he can really become emperor. He suddenly wakes up, looks around confusedly, and quickly realizes that it was all just a dream. His heart beats faster, he breathes heavily, and thinks, what strange nonsense. Where could an archangel have come from here? Suddenly he notices a sheet of paper on the bed. Taking the scroll in his hands, he unfolds it and realizes that it is a map of the route to the Principality of Trabzon. He does not understand why she appeared here. A white feather slowly falls onto his bed. He takes it in his hands and looks at it for a long time, trying to understand what it might mean. He laughed, rejoicing that he finally had a chance to get rid of him from his house. Once a man approached Adrien and asked him for forgiveness. Adrien realized with surprise that he was no longer asleep. Dominic stood before him, and Adrien immediately understood he had appeared just when needed. Adrien ordered Dominic to gather all the warriors, but Dominic asked in surprise if this meant that attacks would now be introduced to maintain the army. Adrien quickly explained that it was not about attacks at all. Adrien says that Heracles will soon set out for the Principality of Trebizond. He warns, as soon as Heracles returns, he will be attacked immediately. Dominic asks if he is really going to start a rebellion, but instead of answering directly, he just smiles and says that he has finally been lucky, and it seems as if God himself has taken his side. Suddenly, he sharply throws off the curtains, wraps himself in them, and angrily says that he wants to pour all his grievances and dirty life onto you to make you feel his pain, and after that he intends to kill Heracles. Heracles gives his people a sign that it is time to act according to the plan. He entrusts them with the final preparations and assures that he will soon inform everyone about the return of the lost lands. Christopher responds by promising that everything will be done. Heracles says that his brother once wanted to kill him. He believes that his brother might try again. Karolina Galenus decisively grabbed Heracles by the hand. When he turned to her, she looked him straight in the eyes and firmly said that she would not let it happen. She smiles, thinking that he will fail again, and he, with calm confidence, is convinced that he has everything under control, as if the situation is in his palm. Heracles goes out to the balcony to the people gathered there. A large crowd has gathered below. Everyone is listening to his words, carefully hearing what he will say. Heracles calmly shares all the details with them, speaking in a quiet voice without unnecessary emotions. While he speaks, Adrien silently looks through the window, lost in his thoughts. Several days have passed since Heracles began to carry out his plan. Everyone was actively discussing among themselves that they had never really heard anything like this before at the Elders' Council meetings. Everything happened exactly as the Archangel Gabriel had told. Someone notices that there are still unclear moments. It turns out that this prophetic drawing appeared in Prince Adrien's dream. Adrien does not like this nickname, and as soon as the boy notices it, he immediately gets scared and starts apologizing. Everyone around falls silent and stops any movement. Adrien insists that he be heard. He believes that it was his father who should have chosen the successor, not Heracles, because Adrien is the favorite of the gods and, in his opinion, the true emperor. He believes that this message is his special reward for all the hardships he had to endure. Archangel Jibril gave him this chance, and therefore he is not going to lose it. He tells the people that they too would have been in the same trouble if not for his brother. Then their lives could have been much better. The people, a little frightened, agree with him and say that it is indeed so. Adrien asks the Bulgarians if it was also difficult for them to trade with him. The Bulgarians are a nomadic people, most of whom belong to one race, although among them there are elves of royal or noble origin. The main wealth for the Bulgarians is sheep, which they mostly trade. However, sometimes the Bulgarians face oppression from the Lemurians, since Hercules is not satisfied with the trade conditions between their peoples. They share with Adrien everything they know, but he only smiles mysteriously and assures that he could understand them without words. Adrien admits that he would not mind seeing their wild nature in battle. Suddenly, someone knocks loudly on the door, and this terribly angers Adrien. With indignation, he asks what the noise is. A servant quickly enters the room, noticeably agitated, and reports that something extraordinary has happened. He loudly declares that Hercules and the 40,000-strong army of the Lemurians were drowned in the RTLC area. Everyone is gripped by fear. Did their ship really sink? All the events around happen as if in a strange dream. Dominico turns to Adrien and asks what to do next in such a situation, and suddenly Adrien realizes everything. He understood that this was a real message. He turns to his friends and says that they are real heroes because they did not succumb to his brother's persuasions. He took a step forward, feeling that his time had come. Looking at the defeat of the brothers and feeling his own rise, he sought to give each of them due respect and acknowledge their glory. He decisively announces aloud that he will become the new emperor. The people around do not calm down. Someone sincerely wishes him glory. At this moment, Adrien is confident he will be able to defeat even Hercules. If Heracles uses the map of sea routes, he will return exactly to this port, and they will be able to meet him on the plateau near the port. He decided to pull him off the horse and grab him with his own hands. In his thoughts, he imagined tearing out those tear-filled eyes and cutting off the enemy's head. He is preparing a huge army, imagining how he will finally make Heracles answer for all his actions before his father's grave. He stands among his warriors and calmly assesses the situation. With a slight smile on his face, he jokes that he probably came late again, or that there are so few opponents that they are not even visible. Here he was informed that Hercules' troops are already approaching. He smiled a greedy smile. This was the moment he had been waiting for so long. This day was special for him, because only today did he truly desire to meet him. He eagerly awaits the moment when Hercules will smile his confident smile. Meanwhile, Hercules' warriors are already ready with weapons, and Hercules himself notices Hadrian's approach from afar. Adrien watches Hercules' army fearfully, not understanding how this became possible. His mind refuses to accept the fact that Hercules has such a large army. The sergeant replies that they themselves do not understand anything. According to their report, most should have remained at the bottom of the sea. Adrien notes that, according to forecasts, they should not look so energetic and unharmed. He is convinced the archangel's advice cannot be wrong. They really should have sunk to be struck by the wrath of the sea spirit. He loudly declares that he will never believe it. Capricious sea spirits could not possibly like someone like Hercules. He asks what they should do, even if everything is as said, and Heracles, who is watching their conversation from a distance, tries to calm the others and assures them everything is under control, since everyone is already on edge. He asks Karolina if she notices this, but the girl replies a little confusedly that she will most likely refrain from answering. A man appears behind and disdainfully remarks that all this looks pathetic. He emphasizes, Adrien didn't even bother to check the facts and immediately believed in the death of his army. This man is Edmund, Hercules' half-brother. With pain in his voice, he says that having such a brother is a real misfortune, as a foolish relative only spoils the blood. Heracles smiled upon hearing his own words and said that they spoke about their mutual brother. After that, he apologized to him for his carelessness. The man's name is Edmond. He is a half-elf from a military family, a half-brother on the father's side. When the war with Panther Dalios was ongoing, he was entrusted with the protection of the capital. But this time, the city's defense was assigned to Galfi Scalonis. Hercules addresses Edmund with a question. Why is Adrien so different from the rest, since at first glance they all had the same upbringing? Edmund only smiles in response and says he will take these words as a compliment. And Karolina Gallienus adds that Titus should also be here at this point. Titus angrily pushed away everything offered, and like a child, loudly exclaimed that he absolutely did not want to go on this campaign. They assured him that it was a personal order from Hercules, because a great campaign would soon begin and everyone needed preparation, but such words terribly outraged him. What business did he have with other people's wars? Today the muse had come to him, and if he now put down the brush, he would disgrace his family. Worried, he exclaims that if Adrien really intends to kill him right now, so be it. For a true artist, there is no better death than to die with a brush in hand. Therefore, he does not intend to leave his place. While the servant tells Hercules about what is happening, Karolina Gallienus shares her thoughts. She is also sure that he will not come to this meeting. Hurley feels that he is being treated unfairly. He wants everyone to carefully listen to his terms. Only then will he agree to do anything. He turns to Titus with a proposal to go draw sketches behind the castle walls. Titus suddenly quickly turns around, and admiration appears in his gaze, of course. He will not refuse and joins the company. Hercules admits that he is easily bribed. Edmund only sighs heavily, thinking about how there are always such people around him. He no longer knows what else to say here. But even now, when he speaks on behalf of one of the Imperial Army warriors, nothing changes. He continues to draw strange, completely unnecessary things. Hercules says that if he remains in his castle like that, he will be unable to help either himself or others. There is a great risk that Adabran's people will kill him. In any case, sooner or later, he will have to serve him. He watches as Adrien confusedly tries to understand what happened and mentally sympathizes with him. Poor Adrien didn't understand anything at all. My dad constantly bowed to the nobility, dreaming of one day becoming emperor. And Mom, although she was not allowed to, also bowed her head for him to somehow atone for her guilt. He is convinced that his parents always loved Adrien more. In his thoughts, he addresses his brother and tries to explain. He didn't take anything from him. If he hadn't made a mistake then, he could have become emperor on his own. Now he feels regret because of everything that happened. He has to rule the country that his parents valued so much. He reports that a roundup is beginning. Panther Dalios says that this is how they found out the names of everyone who took part in the uprising. After this meeting, they had the opportunity to neutralize Adrien and his entire gang together and end their evil forever. Hercules is convinced that instead of gradual cleansing, it is worth arranging one big battle and proving to everyone that it's better not to joke with him. Galphus Gallion approaches Hercules and announces his arrival. He smiles, happy that he has finally arrived, and confidently takes the scroll from the guard. He asks how Christopher is doing, and he replies that everything is fine, although he is a little upset that he won't see with his own eyes how his nephews quarrel. Christopher laughs and says he tries to be careful, so he even returned to the castle to be safe. He says that we have to finish everything quickly and then return home with souvenirs and exciting stories. Adrien could not understand why Mrs. Jibril said those words to him. After all, he was convinced that his army was doomed to lose, wasn't it? He remembers how she said that everything would be fine and that the Lord is always with him. Sweat runs down his face, and he himself is confused and doesn't know what to do next. He clenched his fist and began arguing with himself in his thoughts. No, everything is not as it seems. This is probably a test from the Lord, and he believed he could overcome it. He asks how many warriors their army has. They answer him that currently they have about 18,000 infantrymen, another 2,000 crossbowmen and horsemen each, and also promised to send reinforcements, 8,000 cavalrymen from Bulgarin. It turned out that they are about 30,000. Hearing this, Adrien immediately asked how many soldiers their opponent has. He said that they are now behind the fort walls, so it is impossible to determine the exact number. Usually, a regular army has about 20,000 infantrymen and another 10,000 archers and cavalrymen. So in total, it comes to about 40,000 warriors. Adrien said that everything is clear to him. It turned out that the difference equals 10,000. He exclaims with joy that they have a real chance to win. He is confident they will definitely win and finish everything right here, on this plateau. At that moment, someone suddenly calls them to stop and advises not to fight on this plateau. Adrien asks with annoyance who this stranger really is. The man calls himself Oscar Allman and advises Adrien to carefully reconsider everything once again. At the same time, Adrien is told that Oscar is the second son, who comes from the younger branch of the great Allman family. For many years, the Allman family has ruled large southern lands of Missouri. Their possessions became the main economic support of the entire empire. Thanks to their enormous financial power, this race constantly arouses envy among the long-eared. However, the Allman people themselves often feel similar feelings towards the elves. In the past, quarrels arose more than once between these two peoples, and sometimes it even came to real fights. It was at this moment that the Allmans became allies of the so-called Adrien Veng. For Oscar Allman, the second son in the family, this was a failure. He was appointed advisor to Adrien. Adrien is angry because he is not even part of the main branch of the family, and now some unknown person intends to advise him. Everything will be decided depending on what he tells him. Oscar replies that he understands his emotions. He says that now their army is almost equal in strength to the enemy. However, their opponent is General Galphus Gallienus, who not only commands the army, but also personally trains his soldiers. All his warriors are part of the elite, and the most dangerous is considered the heavy cavalry, commanded by the general himself. Their army is extremely diverse, which creates many difficulties. The greatest suffering is the lack of coordination in actions among the warriors. In addition, they all have modern armor of a new model, which they are not yet accustomed to. But Adrien just shrugs and says he sees no problem with it. Oscar objects, it's not just about that. Then Adrien asks what exactly worries Oscar, but he just stays silent, staring thoughtfully at the floor. But in the end he says that according to Mrs. Jabril, Hercules' army was supposed to perish in the waters. However, now they see something completely different. The enemy is carefully prepared and stands ready for battle. At this moment his unease only intensifies. It seems the enemies deliberately lured them into a trap. He realizes, if the battle starts on the plateau, victory will be much harder than if they defended in the fortress. Therefore he turns to Adrien, urging once again to carefully consider everything. Adrien, furious to the extreme, grabs him and exclaims whether he really realizes what he is saying. Does he really advise him to hide behind the fortress walls? He loudly shouts that he will no longer endure humiliations from his brother. Even if he stands on the highest peak, he will still make him fall and shatter on the ground. Moreover, this nameless one has no right to command him, for he himself is the true emperor. He quickly pushes him down and says, "If everything is clear, take your place." He silently stands up and apologizes. At that moment, Adrien loudly declares that even God himself is proud of them, so they should not despair or lose faith in themselves. Oscar left confident that Adrien would die and Hercules would win the battle. Now it remained only to find a way for their army to start the offensive. 3 days have passed since the battle between the army of Hercules and the army of Hadrian. Both sides have already finished building fortifications. Throughout this time, there were no provocations against Hercules' army, no one shot arrows or threw stones. Although the war was about to begin, silence and calm still prevailed on the battlefield. Karolina Galonis carefully looks around the outpost of Hercules' army. Nearby stands Panter Dalios. He quickly assesses the situation and says, "There are about 30,000 enemies here." He notes that they conducted good preparation. To this, Heracles only smiles and replies that these are trifles, because they still belong to the nobility. For such people, gathering a large army is a very simple matter. In their empire, not only the emperor has his own army, even aristocrats keep personal warriors. If you compare this empire with others, it seems very weak. Although they once repelled a bandit attack here, they failed to completely eliminate this threat. Most of those who own property always look for ways to secure it, so it is not surprising that aristocrats surround themselves with mercenaries for protection. Unlike mercenaries such as Panter Dalios, aristocrats have had their own lands in many places since ancient times. The main branch of the family had their vassals, and their offshoots had their own subordinates, thus creating a whole network of dependencies. Heracles was convinced that if they worked together, they could create a truly invincible army. He sighed and said that this is exactly why he does not like aristocrats, because everything is decided by family ties, and power always passes by inheritance. He claims that blood kinship is an extraordinary power that arose just like that, from nowhere. To refuse this power is the same as rejecting a gift given by the heavens. Panter Dalios smiles and says that this also applies to Hercules. Hercules agrees with him, nodding his head. Yes, that is indeed so. But when blood ties lose their purity, they become just ordinary red water. Even noble blue blood then becomes worthless. He suggests giving these bonds to God right here and now. Hercules addresses someone below and asks what they would answer if they thought differently. Suddenly, representatives of another race approach them. Gelfie's Gallienus pondered, what if the Bulgarians support the enemies? He could not understand the purpose of their appearance here. Suddenly, Hercules appeared on the stairs and admitted that he was the one who invited them to come. He says that the Bulgar warriors are famous for acting unexpectedly. They are strongest during sudden attacks, but in direct confrontation their advantage disappears, which is why he is surprised they came out onto the open battlefield and decided to send them a messenger. Hercules emphasizes that what is now before them is the true proof of his words. He addresses the people in their language and wonders what an ordinary young man can say to them. He admits that he himself was surprised at how quickly he learned their language, but also notes that if you really want to, finding your own teacher is not that difficult. He smiles and says that he strives to become a true friend and loyal ally. After all, the emperor must understand the language of his people. Is it even possible for him to think otherwise? A general approaches him and asks if he is really the emperor of Lemuria. The general is surprised that the emperor is so young. Hercules invites him to his tent, so Galphus turns to Galonis and reminds him that now everything is on his shoulders. Galonis obediently lowers his head and carries out the task. Heracles tells the general that this time he is ready to ignore what happened. The general does not understand what is being talked about and approaches closer. Then Heracles proposes to make a deal with him. The general nervously sits down on the chair. Hercules hands him the document and calmly says that this agreement is divided into 4 parts. Mutual agreement. It is forbidden for both sides to be hostile or to open official trade routes between each other, and the king of Bulgaronia must send his troops if the emperor of Lemuria requests it. In return, Lemuria will pay Bulgaronia a tax annually. He rereads these terms and asks with surprise what it all means. Hercules says that their people constantly migrate from place to place. He says that if they do not switch to farming, life will not improve. Relying only on meat and staying healthy is the wrong decision. To start farming, it is necessary to have certain knowledge, grain, and other needed things. And to get them, one has to either attack others or find opportunities to exchange and trade. This time they decided to take advantage of the fight for the throne to take everything they needed. But if Adrien does not become king, did they really think Hercules would want to give in to them? They pondered what had happened. Heracles points out, since they are on the same side, they should not be enemies. Everyone leans toward the idea that it could have happened by mistake. However, the question remains. How far is he able to foresee their actions? The general, overwhelmed by fear, quickly said he understood everything. He agreed to sign the agreement and declared that from now on Bulgarin is withdrawing from this war. The general feels an inexplicable anxiety because of this man, although it was not so with another. He is burdened by a heavy weight. Before him is a man whose gaze seems to pierce the soul and knows everything about him. Hercules shows the concluded contract and declares that from now on everyone is bound by this agreement. Then he orders his Bulgarian acquaintances to leave immediately. The general understands. If he makes even the slightest mistake, Hercules can easily destroy them. Adrien is worried and cannot understand what the Bulgarian troops have planned. He quickly orders his soldiers not to attack the enemy to avoid provoking an unexpected reaction. A soldier approaches him and says that he has brought important news from the Bulgarian envoy. He reports that Bulgaria has signed a treaty with the Lemurian Empire and has decided to no longer participate in the war. Adrien strikes the soldier with force and begins to curse, insulting the nomads. He loudly declares that these people cannot be trusted. He keeps beating the soldier, loudly shouting that everyone around wants to betray him. In his thoughts, there is complete confusion. He cannot understand why all this is happening and why he has to go through it. Eventually, he calmed down, noticed that the soldier was unconscious but still breathing heavily. His face was lit up with a relieved smile. He stood up and, though there was a tremor in his voice, assured everyone that he was fine. On the contrary, now everything is becoming even more exciting, for God himself supports him. This is only a trial, after which he is to take the throne. He quietly mumbles to himself that the difference always remains 10,000. It doesn't matter at all. He is confident in his victory over Heracles. Rejoicing, he recalls how Mr. Biddle told him that the future of Lemuria depends precisely on him. He understands. He simply cannot lose. He says that you can no longer just throw stones. It's time to take up real weapons. At that very moment, a soldier stands up. Hercules notices the Bulgarians from afar and thinks that, it seems, they have already completed part of what was agreed upon. In his opinion, this is much better than having aristocratic troops of his own, who are difficult to control. The Bulgarian army is a true people's army, with a modern management system. The main obstacle has already disappeared. Hercules draws his sword and confidently declares that now is the time to enter the battle. He commands his men to disperse to their positions and prepare for action. Hercules is inflamed with anger, calling to deal with the merchants, and Hadrian shouts that the usurper emperor must be destroyed, for with them is the power of the Lord himself. The attack begins. Archers prepare their bows to shoot, and crossbowmen keep up, competing with them and releasing arrows high into the sky. Above the battlefield, countless multicolored arrows are already flying, yet the warriors do not stop, boldly advancing and relentlessly attacking the enemy. The war itself rages, and thousands of arrows whistle through the air. The crossbowmen do not stop for a moment, shooting one arrow after another and calling upon the spirits of the wind for help. They are ordered, now move together with these arrows. Hercules sees everything happening from afar and gives the order for the heavy cavalry to advance. At that moment, one of the soldiers signals for everyone to be ready. Karolina Gallienus, together with her uncle and other fighters, rush into the attack. Adrien instantly recognizes this signal. He sharply orders the warriors to keep their distance and the horsemen to attack and crush the enemy. The soldiers promptly obey his order and rush forward swiftly. One of the soldiers steps forward and addresses the wind, asking it to give him strength to protect himself. In his soul, he fervently wishes that the warrior of the false emperor standing before him would fall in this battle. During the fierce battle, the warriors again ask the spirits of the wind to support them and help show the power of their empire. The galleon Galfa flies forward at full speed, and behind it flames blaze. The enemies freeze in fear, holding their breath and not taking their eyes off the dangerous spectacle, for they understand their fate is already decided. When Gelona's Galfi passes by the soldiers, not a trace remains of them, only ashes are scattered by the wind. Gelona's Galfi himself laughs and mockingly calls them miserable, weak creatures. Galfus Galonus proudly declares that no man will survive under the weight of his powerful steps. At this time, the soldiers begin accusing Karolina and Edmund of treason, saying that they serve the fallen Semperator. Edmund informs Karolina that he intends to go further alone, which frightens her a little. She asks once again what he has planned. Edmund replies that he has not been at the center of events for a long time and wants to feel the fighting spirit again. Hearing this, Karolina Gallienus cautiously steps away from him. The warriors who rush to meet them shout loudly, "The guy is running away." They decided to deal with the old man first and only then rush after her. Edmund confidently looks at his enemies and sighs quietly. He is truly sorry. He believes that calling someone old just because that person has lived a little longer than others is completely wrong. The soldiers look at Edmund with surprise, not understanding what he is talking about, but he only smiles, glances at their stature, and calmly says that he will start with them. He summons his spirit together with Ramelius and orders them to guide these clumsy soldiers, explaining where they should move. His spirit turns out to be a woman in a hat, whose face is adorned with mysterious patterns. Suddenly, a dark force gathers around several soldiers, binding their movements and completely paralyzing them. However, they do not understand at all what has happened. Suddenly, their weapons vanish right from their hands, and they themselves are no longer able to move even a bit. The spirit summoned by Edmund, named Andromalius, has a unique gift. He can accidentally take various things from people nearby, and at the same time can affect up to 300 people. The enemies hurry on horseback, and suddenly notice that they no longer have spears or helmets. Enraged by this turn of events, they demand to immediately return everything they have lost. Karolina Gallione decisively approaches a soldier. He confusedly asks her not to move forward, explaining that he is unarmed. But Karolina does not hesitate for a second. She calls upon her spirit, Elegus, for help. She, together with Eligos, deals with the crowd of enemies with one powerful strike, loudly declaring that it even hurts her just to look at these people. She loudly calls to Edmund, reminding him that it is now her turn. Meanwhile, Edmund quietly rejoices that Karolina decided to make a contract with the most powerful spirit, Eligos. Karolina Gallienus is truly an outstanding witch, and he is lucky to be able to become her ally in this battle. Suddenly he sees lace underwear in his hand, shifts his gaze to Karolina, and falls silent in embarrassment. He irritably replies that all things will be returned after the battle. Ramalia usually finds weapons and armor, although sometimes she comes across other interesting items. Panther Dalios laughed loudly and began boasting to Hercules about the strength of his warriors. To this, Hercules calmly smiled and said that their achievements are the result of persistent and exhausting training. At first, he planned to send Halbert Dyers forward, but the enemy suddenly fired a crossbow bolt right into the front ranks. In such a situation, sending Halbert, even with shields, no longer made any sense. Hercules admitted that he would still like to experience it, but nevertheless decided not to succumb to temptation. Panther Dalios agreed that it was wise and assured that they would have many similar opportunities. Panther Dalios asks where Titus is. Hercules calmly points his hand in a certain direction and replies that he is there. The crossbowmen kept shooting relentlessly, when suddenly a huge tiger spirit appeared before them. From its power, the space around seemed to contract, and fear instantly gripped all the warriors. The crossbowmen shouted in panic, not understanding what terrifying creature stood before them. And Tit stands next to a soldier, watching all this, and says that it is wonderful. He wishes for everyone to be destroyed. Tit holds a brush, stands by a painting, and with a smile admits that he is proud of his work. Two soldiers approached Tit and asked him to hide his head because arrows were flying too close. They stood nearby and raised their shields, protecting Tit from the enemy threat. Tit, in response, asked them to do everything possible to keep him safe. He takes the brush in his hand, calls Decambria to him, and declares that a new artistic masterpiece awaits them ahead. Next to him, a bright, noticeable flower hovers in the air. The spirit of Titus named Decambirian has an unusual gift. His brush creates real miracles. The special juices it secretes can bring any drawing to life. As soon as Decambirian touches the canvas and paints something, the image immediately comes alive, gains strength, and begins to live its own life. Titus says that it is the bird's turn to act. He orders it to tear the merchants with its sharp claws. Suddenly, a two-headed bird appears, rising into the sky, preparing to attack. Titus enthusiastically commands his eagle to fly forward, admiring its beauty. The eagle spreads its wings wide and boldly rushes at the enemies. Its sharp claws do not allow the opponents to even approach the fight. Titus smiles and admits that he has not summoned spirits for a long time. Although he is tired, his painted pictures turn out extraordinarily beautiful. For Titus, there is nothing better than bringing his drawings to life. Suddenly, an arrow hits the eagle's wing, creating a hole there. Titus responds confusedly. After all, he was ordered to be more careful and hide better. The enemies do not immediately realize that they are facing paper beasts, but then someone among them notices and loudly says so. He smiles and assures his comrades that there is nothing to fear. If these are just paper figures, there is definitely nothing to be afraid of. He even calls them simple dolls. Titus hears these words too. He suddenly bursts out with a loud scream, either laughing at his creation or going mad from his own power. But if so, then let him meet his own demise. He often draws various animals, and Panther Dalios watches him from afar, thoughtfully checking if everything is all right with the boy. Hercules says that Titus has a strong character, but it will not last long. According to Hercules, this inspiration will only be enough for Titus for a few drawings. At this moment, Adrien watches everything happening and cannot believe what he sees. He shouts angrily, calling Hercules a false emperor, and does not understand how he managed to defeat them. He thinks that there is no great threat from Edmund, but the real problem turned out to be this persistent Karolina Gallienus, who constantly interferes. He sighs and says that at least Titus must be removed. If Titus can no longer even summon a spirit, then why is he still alive? He loudly declares that the crossbowmen will no longer be able to hold the defense, so he gives the order for everyone to advance. His words echo far, and everyone clearly hears this command. Hercules sees the situation from afar and loudly announces that their infantry has already started the attack, so their time to act has come. He orders to send Titus to the fortress and commands the crossbowmen to disperse and retreat. He loudly ordered the halberdiers to move forward. Hercules addressed Panther Dalios, reminding him that, as agreed, he is responsible for the right flank because he knows well what to do. Panther confidently replied that he is keeping the situation under control and understands what is happening. Hercules withdraws from the main fortress. He quietly mutters to himself that the moment has come to see his brother's facial expression. He even feels curiosity about this meeting. Adrien shouts loudly from afar, complaining that because of these drums, his nerves are already at the limit. He has no idea what Hercules has planned. The two sides took their positions, clearly marking the lines of demarcation. Now everyone understands what the forces of both factions look like. The battle moves to a decisive stage, and the final clash is at the doorstep. Hercules ordered the archers to gradually retreat from both sides and commanded the halberdiers to protect their retreat and not let the enemy break through. Panther Dalios ordered the archers to retreat as quickly as possible and the halberd guards to stay in their places and stand to the end. The spearmen were tasked with covering the flanks and helping maintain order in the ranks. However, the enemies advance, but a wall of brave warriors stands before them. These heroes know well that the enemies will not pass further. Hercules, having a special talent for communication, advised them not to waste the army's strength and urged to restrain the warriors from reckless attacks. Adrien explodes with anger, not understanding what these senseless soldiers are doing. Irritated, he orders the lightly armed cavalry to immediately go to support the infantry. The soldiers quickly obey the order and move forward. Gelphus, together with Galonus, sees everything with their own eyes. He cannot stand it, and his cry sounds. Gelphus swears he will not allow this. He calls upon his spirit, and at that moment flames spread across the entire field. Horses neigh fearfully and twitch, about to panic at any moment. The soldiers, meanwhile, stand aside, not knowing what to do next and looking confused. Adrien became even angrier at Galonus, son of Galf, and shouted that even if his father respects this boy, choosing a foolish younger brother instead of his own elder son is still unfair. Oscar looks around and cannot figure out what this eccentric Adrien is up to. He only keeps giving strange and incomprehensible orders. He mentally notes that Heracles' army is moving, as if it intends to outflank them and encircle from all sides. Looking at his warriors, he suddenly realizes Hadrian's army is doing exactly what Hercules wants. If events continue to unfold this way, his troops will inevitably suffer defeat. Despair overwhelms him, and finding no way out, he clenches his fists, not knowing what step to take next. Suddenly, one of the warriors falls near him. Arrows whistle around, but Oscar manages to raise his shield and takes all the blows on himself, saving his comrade. The warrior retreats backward in surprise, and Oscar asks if he can stand up. He is allowed, and he slowly, carefully rises from the ground. He realizes that there are plenty of soldiers and servants of the Mindel house around. He has no right to allow the Mindel family to suffer misfortune in such a place. He believes that he must save everyone without exception. Therefore, loudly shouting to his comrade, he promises they will definitely return alive. He walks on while Adrien looks around confusedly at everything happening nearby. The soldiers froze in place, not daring to move forward, but the enemy also makes no attempt to approach. The battle does not subside. One of the soldiers loses a leg, and Adrien sees another enemy quickly slip past him. He was completely confused. Even the archers kept their bows lowered, and Adrien had not the slightest idea where this path led. He looks more closely and finally realizes that the soldiers are just passing by him. He is suddenly gripped by panic, and his heart starts pounding with fear. He exclaims with excitement that it is impossible, as a magical circle is visible right in front of them. Loudly warning everyone, he quickly orders the soldiers to retreat, stating that the situation is becoming critical. And suddenly before the soldiers appears Gelphis Galianis Karolina himself. Everyone is confused, and Adrien is so scared that he cannot even utter a single word. Hercules learned that the light cavalry had already been overcome. He rejoiced and said that this was very good. He thought that now Adrien understood everything. Long ago there lived an old general whose name was shrouded in legends. People said he crossed high mountains, traversed half a continent, drove the Lemurian Empire into a dead end, and became famous for his brilliant strategies. Many tried to apply this winning strategy, but not understanding its true meaning, they all ultimately suffered bitter defeat. This plan relies on three main things. First, you need to have more riders than the opponent. Second, the army must be strong and well-trained. And finally, most importantly, the commander must be a true talent, a wise general. Only when all these conditions come together is there a chance to win. When troops choose smart and unexpected tactics and act quickly, they achieve brilliant victories. Such strategies should be remembered and not forgotten until the very end of the battle. All this indicates a tactic of complete encirclement. Hadrian's warriors realize with horror that they have fallen into a trap, enemies on all sides. Adrien loudly calls everyone to immediately break through the defense line. He decisively rushes forward to stop the enemy archers. The warriors around are confused and do not understand how to act next. It is then that Hercules confidently lowers his hand, giving the signal to start the attack. Warriors are pierced by arrows, and all of them die in agony as the sharp tips penetrate their bodies. Adrien collapses weakly to the ground, groans in pain, and barely whispers that this is simply impossible. The realization of the cruel truth tears his heart apart. His army has perished. When the enemy is completely surrounded, victory is almost guaranteed, but making this a reality is very difficult. First and foremost, the decisive factor was that by eliminating the Bulgar cavalry, it was possible to gain numerical superiority. This was important because they posed the greatest threat, and Heracles managed to organize everything so that the Bulgars were withdrawn from the battlefield without unnecessary losses and without any reward. This was exactly what he wanted to achieve. Fortunately, the empire decided to abandon the services of mercenaries. Instead, it began to increase its standing army and diligently train its own soldiers. Once, the Lemurian imperial army had to rely only on temporary mercenaries to defend against Bulgar attacks, and it was not easy. Heracles was able to carry out this circle strategy only because he carefully selected his generals. In this battle, it is very important to choose the appropriate weapon. If all soldiers used only spears, they would not be able to outsmart their opponent. And even if everyone were given a halberd, it would not provide an advantage. The army still would not withstand the onslaught of the enemy army. In other words, to truly become strong, you need to find the weapon that suits you best. Finally, the whole picture becomes complete thanks to Pantry Dalios. Until then, Hercules could not personally command a large army of 20,000 soldiers. But as soon as he hands over part of the troops to an experienced commander, they can immediately implement the plan to encircle the enemy. Starting from the very beginning, the commanders form a new army, step by step improving the warriors' skills and gradually driving the foreigners off the battlefield. This allows the true commanders to take control of the entire battle. The warriors surrender and beg for mercy, assuring that they are ready to give everything to be spared their lives. One of them constantly emphasized that he served as a vassal to one of the 77 sacred aristocrats. He threatened that if he died, it would not go without consequences. His lineage and the lineage of his lord would not remain idle. But despite these warnings, he was killed on the spot, just as quickly as all the previous ones. Warriors hide behind shields, trying to escape danger. Someone shouts not to push so hard as space is running out. Everyone has fear in their head. If they don't get out of this ring, there is no chance of rescue. One of them shouts that if Adrien is really of noble blood, let him try to negotiate with Hercules and open the way for them. But it is already too late to seek compromises. All are gripped by panic, pushing each other, and do not even understand whom they are fighting for or why they ended up in the middle of this battle. Hercules smiles, then bursts out laughing loudly. He asks everyone if they notice what they actually do not feel. After that, Hercules turns to Adrien and shouts something in his direction. He loudly thanks because it was thanks to this person that he managed to repeat this amazing strategy from the legends himself. He is sincerely grateful for the opportunity to become a younger brother and is very happy that such an obedient and devoted brother is beside him. Hearing these words, Panther Dalios pondered. He recalled that the encirclement strategy appeared a whole 1,000 years ago, and here before him stood an ordinary boy, only 15, but he not only understood this complex tactic, he masterfully applied it. And although many people had tried to implement this strategy before, almost all had been defeated. He thought elves live on average 200 years, so ahead of him are still 185 years of incredible adventures and discoveries. This realization brought a sincere smile to his face. He says that he looks forward to the future with impatience. Heracles hears this through the connection and asks what exactly he meant. Panther Dalios waves it off, explaining that he just thought aloud and it was nothing important. Panther Dalios says that now they only need to block their path so they don't escape. He asks Heracles not to remove the protection, and he agrees, adding that he understands everything perfectly. He explains that it is still very difficult to fully control the situation around. It is like trying to hold as much water as possible in your palms without spilling a single drop. This is how Pantaraldio describes his feelings. But under a rain of arrows, he doubts that among the commanders there will be one who can calm the confused warriors and unite them to break through the enemy ranks. Heracles says that this changes nothing. Without a true leader among them, they have no chance to break out of the encirclement. Not even a small fly can slip out of such a trap. Suddenly a warrior breaks through the crowd, and Heracles together with Dalios Panthera freeze in surprise. Before them appears Oscar, loudly declaring that today the Almond House will not lose. He loudly commands to move forward, and everyone immediately obeys and follows him. Heracles' warriors encourage each other with shouts, urging they need to gather faster and not let the enemies escape. Heracles turned to Panther Dalios and asked if he could break through the enemy encirclement on his own. He replies that survival will only be possible if very lucky. The chances are no more than 1 in 100. Heracles responds that he understands his feelings, but believes the chances are still better, about 1 in 10. He claims that this was not what influenced the outcome of the battle. Besides, such behavior could spoil his reputation. Panther Dalios laughed and said that even the famous general of the imperial army of Lemuria retreated from the battlefield several times. There is nothing shameful in that. Heracles, smiling, advises Panther Dalios to take a good look. It seems they have just been lucky to discover another extraordinary ability. When Hercules' troops surrounded the aristocrats led by Adrien, a rain of arrows fell upon them, and most of them perished. Those who only commanded the mercenaries from afar, did not go into battle themselves, and did not provide money for the army, were captured and put under arrest by Christopher's men. During the fortress assault, the rebellion leader, Adrien, suddenly disappeared. At the sight of the brutal battle, Edmund managed to find only his helmet. Adrien appealed to the Bulgarians with a request to allow him to stay in their kingdom. His words caused surprise. Everyone present looked at each other, not believing that such a thing could happen. It was a complete surprise for them. The soldiers hold Adrien, not letting him break free. He shouts loudly, trying to understand what is happening, and insists that they release him. The question does not cease in his mind. What exactly are they after and why all this at all? Adrien expresses his thoughts in his native language, but no one responds. Then he persistently asks to explain everything so that he can understand. A Bulgarian said that even if he wanted to help, he still could not do anything, since he himself understands well what is going on around. Meanwhile, Adrien sought refuge in the kingdom of Balgoran, but he was captured and immediately taken to trial in Lemuria. Yes, Hadrian's plan to seize the throne completely failed. His army suffered a heavy defeat. Before him on his knees stood the traitor to the throne Hadrian, with his hands tightly bound behind his back. Around gathered Christopher, Karolina Gallienus, Galphus Gallienus, and Hercules himself was nearby. 3 days passed since Adrian's rebellion was suppressed. Adrien and another 100 of his comrades were captured and now awaited trial for their crimes. Heracles addresses one of the aristocrats and asks him to briefly and clearly explain why he joined the rebellion. He says he does this to protect Heracles from dangers that may arise from within. Hercules asks, if everything is exactly like that, then why did he declare Adrien emperor? He was confused and could not find words to answer, and Heracles only smiled and explained that he was simply taken away from that place. He agreed that everyone around was very surprised. Hercules shares that influential people, who were feared and respected more than him, managed to deceive him. They cunningly took all his wealth and lured his warriors to their side. He still does not know who exactly among these people stands behind such a treacherous betrayal. Hercules cannot believe what he sees. It seems to him like some trick, although in reality everything looks quite plausible. He instantly understands what is going on and, exclaiming, confirms he was indeed set up. Hercules asks who exactly did it. He begins to say that among them was a traitor who deceived him, but suddenly he stops, not knowing what to say next. Galphius Galonius immediately understands. This man is trying to save himself by shifting the blame onto influential aristocrats. If life is so important to him, it would have been better to emphasize the king's greatness rather than humiliate himself and ask for forgiveness now. Heracles says that if he really is involved in the rebellion, then he and his family face mortal danger. However, his family has faithfully served the Giuliano family for many years, and he cannot just reject that. Hercules says that as the head of the family, he has already made a decision: 30 years of hard work. He takes responsibility. He will care for his family, vassals, and their close ones. That is all he wanted to say. He bows deeply and sincerely expresses his gratitude. In his heart lives gratitude and gentleness that will remain with him forever. Then they take him away with them. Heracles admits that he will remember these words forever. At the same time, he is sure 3 years will pass, and no one will remember them anymore. He calls the next man and asks if he has lied to him by any chance. He asks the same question to each of the lesser nobles. He needs at least a formal reason to soften the sentence. For this, he has several reasons. You cannot just take and execute all aristocrats. During the rebellion, many noble families perished. Over the years, their influence weakened, and eventually the aristocrats completely lost power. When the power disappears, it will open the way for the younger houses. They will definitely try to use this chance to gain more influence, and over time, they may take the places of those old families who ruled before. As Hercules already said, after losing the remnants of his influence, the nobility can no longer threaten the emperor's power. During the uprising, they lost everything. Their might now exists only in memories and former glory. Therefore, punishment in the form of imprisonment, fines, and forced labor will be a fair decision. Hercules presents his next argument, emphasizing that this is already the third and final reason. Among Adrien's most important allies was one of the most influential politicians, the supreme aristocrat from a noble half-elf family. He is fully aware of the situation he is in and is confident that he is not threatened with execution. Why is that? Because he sincerely apologized and is convinced that he is doing the right thing. Although most in the courtroom are rowers of the imperial court, among them there are those who still owe him a favor. With their support, he will be able to avoid punishment. Feeling confident, the hero understands. Hercules finds himself in a situation where he must act decisively. Hans is confident and somewhat naive. He begins to explain something, but Hercules interrupts him and informs that serious charges have been brought against Hans. Hans is confused and does not understand at all what is being talked about. Hercules informs Hans that he is sentenced to imperial liquidation. From now on, Hans is deprived of his noble status. Hearing this, Hans is confused and frightened. He was not at all prepared for such a verdict. Heracles admits that his life is doomed to loneliness, and that it will be so until the very end. After death, according to him, his body will be burned. He sincerely asks to be given a little more time to at least briefly postpone this inevitable fate. Although it hurts him, Heracles wishes that his torment never ends. Hans exclaimed that this cannot be done. He is not capable of this. As he comes from a noble family, he is a nobleman. How did this young man even dare to address him as if he were an ordinary man from the lower classes? It is better to put an end to everything and let him die with honor. Hercules invites the next one. His true goal from the very beginning was representatives of the highest aristocracy. In simple words, he wanted to punish influential aristocrats, whom no one had dared to approach before. Shifting the blame of the younger nobles onto their senior colleagues, he achieved silence in the courtroom. No one even dared to contradict his verdict. Moreover, the aristocrats who had already been forced to betray their former allies are unlikely to dare to oppose him again. Raising a rebellion does not yet mean saving one's life. And even if some think about uniting with other houses, the younger generation first needs to feel how complicated everything is and recognize what is really happening. Minor nobles were punished with imprisonment and confiscation of property, while influential ones were stripped of titles by the emperor. It was by these methods that he managed to cleanse the Lemurian imperial court of several dozen great families. Finally, the very culprit of the celebration approaches the company, Adrien. Before he could even say a word, Christopher confidently pushes him, and the boy falls face down. He was about to say something in response, but those around immediately stopped him, reminding him that the emperor himself was standing before him. Hercules smiled at him and said that a lot of time had passed since their last meeting, addressing Adrien as his elder brother. He thoughtfully asks when they last spoke face to face, or maybe this is their very first real conversation. Heracles says he only heard about him from his friend, Lord Dominic. He is also curious whether it was not his idea to plant the poisoned watermelon. He said that it was then he first saw how poison affects silver, and it impressed him. He really liked this dish, believing that the combination of salty melon, juicy sweet tomatoes, and poison creates an extraordinary flavor duet. He claims that he has never tried this, so he cannot say for sure. He notes that the battle on the plain will definitely become part of history, as it was the first time the tactic of complete encirclement was successfully used there. He is confident that in hundreds of years, only he has managed to carry out this strategy so successfully. Hercules asks if he understands that before the Balguran cavalry left the battlefield, they had a great chance to win, as they could have won the open battle with the reinforcements of the Balgorans and mercenaries they managed to gather. Adrien openly admits he is not worthy to be emperor. Hercules was silent. He sincerely believed that the throne should belong to him after his father's death. He had stated this many times, but since childhood, the father had favored another son, one who was not destined to be the heir to the crown. He loudly addresses all the aristocrats, declaring that they have become victims of deception by this false emperor, urging them not to allow the impostor to remain on the throne, for his words are not just accusations, but a prophecy personally delivered to him by the great archangel Gabriel. He screams as if he has lost his mind, and confidently declares that it is the gods who chose him. According to him, only he is to become the true emperor of the great Lemurian Empire. Everyone around murmured in surprise. Could it really be that he is talking about Gibril himself, the archangel whom only Adrien had seen before? But he confidently asserts that it is true, and to prove his words, he shows a feather from her wing. Hercules says he understands everything and assures it with his words. He addresses Lady Gabriel, asking for permission to enter the hall. Hercules promises that if he is allowed in, he will acknowledge the emperor before everyone. At this time, Karolina Gallienus begins to get very nervous and tries to stop Hercules. Adrien smiles and confidently says that someone will regret these words. He shouts loudly, addressing Lady Gabriel, the mighty archangel, and asks her to intervene. Right now, he says, it is time to tell everyone the truth about the emperor's lies. Adrien begs the archangel to cast the emperor straight into hell. There is silence in the hall. He does not understand why she is still not here. Hercules waits patiently, not losing hope. He asks everyone to endure a little longer and assures that she will definitely appear. Earlier, he repeatedly called Beatty by name, loudly announced his presence, begged her to come out to the hall, calling her again and again, not losing hope. Heracles turns to him and says he has only 3 conditions. If he fulfills them, he will be able to save his life. First, let him swear allegiance to his emperor and promise to obey without objection. Second, he must acknowledge that his lands were seized unlawfully. And finally, third, let him take responsibility for the actions of influential nobles who were subordinate to him. He explains that he will only leave him alive, as his dear mother asked him to. With a trembling voice, he admits that he fully understands his guilt for everything that happened and begs for a chance at forgiveness. Heracles agrees that this is a reasonable decision and reports that according to this order, he is sentenced to life imprisonment. Hercules orders to return him to the dungeon, but suddenly Adrien snatches a knife from him. Adrien takes out scissors and swiftly cuts off the soldiers from himself. Karolina Gallienus pales with horror, and Hercules looks impressed. The blades of the scissors shine brightly, stained with red blood. Adrien leaps at Hercules, loudly shouting that his days are numbered. At the same moment, Karolina Gallienus tightly embraces Hercules, and Christopher defends together with Galfa Gallienus swiftly draw their swords, preparing for a clash. Suddenly Gabriel appears before Adrien and sternly says that this must not be done. Adrien is struck by her appearance and immediately recognizes this figure. It annoys him when he hears her call him the true emperor. If he really is who they think he is, then why is she now defending the impostor? The attendees do not hide their surprise. They do not understand at all what he is about to do. Is he really talking to someone? Gibril smiles and insists that she never spoke about murder. She adds that Adrien is a pretender, and no matter how hard he tries, he will never become emperor. Adrien asks with pain in his voice what she is talking about, since he was chosen by the gods. She replies that it is not true and cannot be, then asks if he wants to know why she thinks so. At this moment, Gibril suddenly changes. He becomes a demon completely devoted to Hercules. A self-satisfied smile appears on his face, and he looks intently at Adrien. He realizes with fear that he has been treacherously deceived, and Hercules coldly wishes Adrien luck. Consumed by rage and despair, Adrien shouts discontentedly, hurling curses at Hercules. He shouts that Heracles is a real devil and demands his crown back. Galfi Galon is so surprised by what he sees that he cannot believe his own eyes. Christopher seriously warns. Near His Majesty's grave, it is forbidden even to mention this. The demoness greeted Hercules, but he replied to her briefly and without emotion. It turns out all the criminals received their punishment, and the festive banquet took place calmly, without any complications. Finally, a young man approaches them, and Heracles immediately asks if he understands why he ended up here. The boy's name is Oscar Almond, and now he is surrounded by the cunning Galphus Galonus and the clever panther Dalios. Oscar instantly falls to his knees and begs for mercy, admitting his guilt. He confesses that he raised a sword against Hercules and is ready to bear any punishment. Such behavior was a complete surprise to Hercules. He admits that at first he misunderstood everything. In fact, he does not want to condemn anyone. Meanwhile, Galphus Galonus and Pantera Dalios ask everyone to stop mocking the boy. Hercules informs Oscar that he has an interesting and profitable offer for him. Oscar immediately shows interest and asks what exactly it is about. Hercules addresses Oscar with a proposal to become a general. Oscar cannot hide his surprise because he remembers how he previously acted against his own country. Then Hercules reveals to him that he has been watching both Oscar and the House of Almond for quite some time. However, when their leader supported Adrien in the fight for the crown, he was captured, and all his lands and titles were taken away. When the leader of their family decided to side with Adrien, he had no choice but to follow him. It so happened that he boarded a ship that soon sank. Because of this event, their house was also lost, and it significantly changed the course of the war. Oscar noted that no matter how circumstances turned out, he is sure there is a candidate who is much more suitable. To this, Hercules asked what exactly Oscar was leading to. He notices with surprise that it was Oscar who managed to break out of the encirclement. To make sure Hercules really saw this, he decides to ask again. In response, he hears that Hercules indeed witnessed everything with his own eyes. He explained that the essence of this encirclement tactic was to scare the enemy and cause panic, which made them unable to continue fighting. However, on the very first attempt, he managed to break out of the encirclement. Oscar remained calm even when enemies surrounded him from all sides and pressed harder and harder. Thanks to this composure, he was able to save his friends at a moment when they had almost no chances left. If someone else had been in his place, they would have surrendered long ago. Hercules emphasizes that he highly values his leadership qualities. A powerful army cannot do without talented commanders. Under his leadership, their country's army will become even stronger. He believes that this is a great opportunity to restore the honor and glory of his family. Most members of this family were stripped of their titles and thrown into prison. Although they avoided the death penalty, imprisonment broke the head of the family, and after that incident, their family lost its former strength. He is convinced, if he accepts His Majesty's offer, he will be able to restore the former glory to the Elman family. However, he consciously closed his eyes to all the crimes committed by his family. Despite what happened, it was I who took a step forward and invited him to become my ally, because I believed in him and recognized him as worthy of my trust. Oscar bowed and explained that he does not have much experience yet, but he asks for help and support. In turn, Hercules expressed hope that the newcomer would settle well among the experienced masters. Hearing this, Oscar smiled sincerely and warmly in response. Finally, everything came to an end. Late at night, they celebrate their victory. But in reality, only Karolina Gallionis and Hercules truly rejoice in this victory. Karolina Gallionis still rejoices that all this is finally behind her. Meanwhile, Hercules shares that just as he resolved matters with the vassal states that were previously under his father's rule, his elder brother immediately rebelled. Who would have thought that the life of an emperor is so hard and full of worries? Hercules shares that after hard work, any food becomes tastier. Karolina Gallionis smiles and notes that the cook has been cooking much better lately. She sincerely rejoices that it is thanks to Nali that the cook has changed. Heracles indignantly asks why she is talking about someone else right now, when they have finally been left alone together. The girl awkwardly replies that she actually meant something completely different. Her face blushes, and she admits that she too has long awaited this moment. Hercules smiled and thought, that is why she chose such a bold outfit. He still clearly remembers how she was shy back then when she had to wear the maid's dress. Karolina Gallionis draws this to herself and admits that everything is really as it is. After all, she is the dearest to him. It is natural to want to please the one you love. What's so strange about that? Heracles happily runs up to her, hugs her tightly, and joyfully exclaims that everything is fine with them. He gently presses her to himself and asks when they will meet again. She smiles in response and says that the rose garden will open in a month. Moreover, the chariot races will start soon. They still have so many interesting adventures ahead. Karolina Gallionis is angry because he cannot leave his worries aside. She knows the next month will be a continuous circle of meetings and inspections. Hercules explodes in response. Everything is already clear to him. He says that since his father's reign, the empire has only become slightly stronger, but many difficulties still lie ahead that need to be overcome. He says that it is worth strengthening relations with neighboring countries, appointing new generals, and restoring the imperial army. Moreover, it is necessary to combat hunger and unemployment, as well as to put the newly annexed territories in order. He says that solving the problems with the western and eastern factions will take a lot of time, and deep down he worries, will he have enough life to finish it all? Karolina Gallionis says that if it concerns Heracles, she has no doubt he will manage. She is convinced that he has already achieved a lot. Karolina Gallionis assured that she would always be nearby and support if help was needed. She fell silent, and silence reigned between them. They simply looked each other in the eyes. He says he can thank her in advance, but she does not understand what he means and asks what exactly he means. Hercules gently runs his hand through her hair and whispers that he dreams of seeing her as his wife. The girl swallows air in confusion. She cannot find words to respond. Heracles stood up, plucked several grape clusters, and made a ring for her from a thin twig. Then he carefully put this ring on her finger. Hercules openly confesses his feelings to her, tells her he dreams of seeing her as his wife, and together they can create a happy future for this country. She cannot hold back tears of joy and then agrees. Here before us is the emperor who revived the Lemurian Empire, which once nearly perished and almost vanished along with the 3 continents that disappeared into the abyss. His name is Hercules I. He is a ruler known as the Emperor of Divine Light, whose feats and glory span 3 continents. His legendary story still lives and continues right now.